Chapter 1786. My lord, take down the assassin. Everything happened too suddenly. When they came back to their senses, Jiang Ji, who was sitting on the main platform, was already lying in a pool of blood. Jiang Ji had already fallen into a pool of blood. The assassin student did not have time to do anything else. The war horse under him suffered a heavy blow and kept neighing in pain. Before the student could do anything, someone grabbed the horse's neck and leaped up. With a sweep, the student fell off the horse's back, causing him to see stars, dislocate his jaw and break his limbs. Don't let him die. Jiang Nongqin did not even look at the assassin. She grabbed him by the neck and threw him to her trusted assistant general and soldiers. Her expression was as fierce as a Rakshasa's. She quickly ordered, "Gather all the generals to seal off the drill ground and camp. From now on, not even a fly is allowed to fly out. Whoever dares to disobey will be killed on the spot. Do you hear me?" "Yes, my lord." Jiang Nongqin was shocked and angry. She acted swiftly and decisively. She directly sent soldiers to surround the audience and students in the drill ground. The students were so frightened by this turn of events that their legs turned to jelly. Their faces were as pale as if they were painted with a thick layer of white paint. Their minds were empty and they almost forgot how to think. In contrast, the reactions of the scholars, noblewomen, scholars, and officials were relatively calm. However, everyone had different thoughts. Their expressions and reactions were slightly different too. Some were worried about Jiang Ji. Would Ji die because of this? Some were worried about whether they would be implicated. Some were worried about the safety of their families. Today, everyone present was in trouble. Jiang Ji? It was fine if Ji Wuji died, but if anything happened, everyone's faces were pale. The Duke of Lanting was assassinated in public. The world was probably going to change. These people either stood up or sat on the spot. They looked nervous but did not dare to act rashly. They were afraid that they would misunderstand and be stabbed to death by the group of soldiers who were eyeing them fiercely. Only Jiang Ji's important official was not worried. Ji Yi's important official did not have any concerns. Wei Ci even ran over with his bare feet. The gravel on the drill ground piercing his soles could not hide the piercing pain in his left chest. His mind was blank. His body followed its instinct to go to Jiang Ji. "Ji. Doctor. Where is the doctor?" Wei Ci carefully helped her up but did not dare to make any big movements. He was afraid that the arrows that pierced her flesh would cause her a second injury. Following Wei Ci's movements, everyone saw Jiang Wan. Ji Yunchu's clothes on her left chest and shoulder were dyed red by the blood. Her right hand was holding the arrow, and her palm was soaked in blood. The blood flowed down her arm and dyed her sleeves the same color. When everyone saw this, they could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Not to mention the location of the wound, just the amount of blood showed that her injury was not light. Wei Ci felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. At this moment, his mood was actually the same as when he first heard His Majesty riding a dragon from the sky in his previous life. At that moment, the beating heart in his left chest seemed to be frozen and sealed, and a chill spread throughout his entire body. Why isn't the doctor here yet? In his previous life, he had died of old age, but this life was different. How could he accept such an accident happening to her? Today was the equestrian archery assessment. In order to prevent any accidents, the best doctors in the military camp and the city were all on standby. Never in a million years would he have thought that the one in trouble wasn't a student, but the Duke of Lanting. Jiang Nongqin captured the assassin. She still could not believe that the student could actually hurt her godlike lord. How could that be? Jiang Nongqin's expression looked calm, but her chest was churning with the urge to kill. However, she was still rational. She knew that she could not kill the assassin yet. They still needed to interrogate the assassin and follow this clue to catch the real culprit. Humph, when the real culprit surfaced, she would definitely tear the person into pieces. Jiang Nongqin personally led the soldiers to surround the main platform. She was afraid that the assassin had accomplices. The students of the Golden Scale Academy, especially the first batch of students, were all orphans of the fallen soldiers, except for a few students who came from aristocratic families. Their lord had nurtured them for more than 10 years, but now there was an assassin. Who knew if there were accomplices of the assassin among the soldiers in the military camp? Now, apart from the lord, everyone present was a suspect for Jiang Nongqin. Not long after, a few doctors rushed over with medical kits. From their disordered breathing, it could be seen that they had also rushed over as fast as they could. After passing through the human wall, the doctors put down the medical kit with a thud and gestured for Wei Ci to put Jiang Wan down. Jiang Wan was put down. At this time, Lv Zheng, who had been the background for a long time, said, "Get a screen to surround this place." Kang Xintong, who came with Lv Zheng as his adopted daughter, stood outside the human wall. Her status was not high enough and the situation was serious. She could not get close. She could only stand on the spot and clench her fingers anxiously. She secretly prayed that the Lord of Lanting would turn misfortune into blessing and that nothing would happen to him. Not only were the people on the drill ground worried, but the salted fish in the live streaming room was also frightened. They were watching Jiang Wan. For so many years, they had seen her kill anyone who stood in her way. She was the epitome of Long Outyan. A person who dared to charge alone with thousands of men and horses could not dodge the 3 arrows shot by the assassin. The bullet screen changed from the original flirtatious comments to cheers and prayers. Only one bullet screen was different. That salted fish was Weibo's programmer. He prayed together with the server. Just as he sent this bullet screen, WeChat and QQ's workgroup exploded. The department management specially called him to work overtime. Salted Fish, the programmer, was speechless. The streamer was shot by an arrow, and the Weibo server was paralyzed in the next second. Sigh, rubbing his cold forehead, the programmer held a cigarette in his mouth. His expression was one of the vicissitudes of life. Before working overtime, the programmer posted his indignation on his WeChat moments. Assassinated? Hee, if she really was assassinated, the national football team would not only win the World Cup, but it would also win it for 100 years. The existence of the live streaming room was too special. People in related industries were highly enthusiastic about the live streaming room. Many scientists had even set up research projects, hoping to draw inspiration from it and vigorously develop artificial intelligence and cross-dimensional technology. The programmer was no exception. According to their research on the live streaming room had a certain relationship with Jiang Wan. It was like the parasitic relationship between the system and the host in the system novel. If the host's life was in danger, it was impossible for the live streaming room to be quiet. However, this was not something that every salted fish knew. When they saw Jiang Wan, she was covered in blood and motionless, they felt like their brains were about to explode. On the other side, under Lu Zheng's reminder, the soldiers took out folding screens and linen to create an area for the doctors to check on the injuries. Feng Zhen and the others retreated, but their eyes were still on Jiang Wan. In Jiang Wan's direction. They looked calm, but their palms were wet with sticky sweat. Their lord had been assassinated in front of their eyes. Thinking of this, Feng Zhen's mood was like Jiang Nongqin's. His chest was filled with murderous intent. At this moment, he heard someone gossiping. They thought their voices were low, but the drill ground was silent. Even the lowest voice sounded noisy. The person said to his friend, "The Duke of Lanting was assassinated. It's fine if she can survive this, but if she can't. She has no children. The one who will ascend the throne in the future will either be her concubine brother, Lu Zhao, or someone from the Lu family. Another person said, the Duke of Lanting is now in his 20s. Girls of the same age can already have children, but she. Could it be that she was born with some hidden disease and can't bear children? It's a pity that her reputation was ruined by an assassination. Her hard-earned foundation has been taken advantage of by her concubine brother. Now that the distinction between the legal wife and the concubine was clear, the scholars valued the legal wife more. The concubine was just a little higher than the servants in the manor. Yes, the Duke of Lanting is successful and a legal wife, but she has no children. In the end, she has to be taken advantage of by a concubine. If the Duke of Lanting passed away, wouldn't the people in the afterlife be angry and come back to life? That way Zixiao just said, save the emperor, didn't he? He didn't ascend the throne when he was alive. If he can be conferred the title of great ancestor after his death, he can barely use the word save the emperor, the person said in a low voice. Lu Shi has never hidden his ambition. She even dared to accept surpassing the emperor. Hearing this, Fengzhen was so angry that he pulled out the sword at his waist and wanted to settle the score. At this time, they were still saying such sarcastic words to sow discord. Did these two people want to die? However, someone moved much faster than him. Before Fengzhen could go over, the two people had already been kicked in the head. Arrest these two people and detain them for interrogation. The person who spoke was an angry Lu Zhao. No one knew when this brat had run over from the other side of the seats. Fengzhen suppressed the surging anger in his heart and took a deep breath to calm himself down. He didn't want to lose control and vent his anger on Lu Zhao. At the same time, the heavily injured Jiang Ji opened his eyes. However, Ji opened her eyes and raised her hand to push away the doctor's action. She used Wei Si's strength to lean in his arms. She pulled out the arrow that was deeply embedded in her shoulder with a little force with her right hand. I'm fine. The doctors, Wei Si and Jiang Nongqin looked at the blood flowing out of the wound on her shoulder and fell silent. Wei Si's hands that were holding her arms tightened slightly. He ground his teeth hard as if he was holding back something. The doctor saw Jiang. Ji woke up and pulled out the arrow herself. She was in a daze. Jiang? Ji didn't see Wei Si's expression and looked up at the other person. Nongqin. Jiang Nongqin didn't have time to think about what had happened. She only knew that her lord was fine. That was enough. I'm here. Later, you and Zixiao will continue to preside over the assessment and comfort the students. Don't let this affect their results. Jiang? Ji had her own plans, but she didn't want to affect the students' results. This assessment had a great impact on their futures. Jiang Nongqin didn't agree immediately. Instead, she looked at Jiang Ji awkwardly. Ji Yunshu's lips moved, but no words came out. After a while, she bowed her head and cupped her fists, saying hoarsely, "This general obeys." As he spoke, the doctor took out a hemostatic powder and sprinkled it on Jiang Xiang. The wound on Ji's shoulder, was the arrow aimed at Jiang? Ji's heart came, but Jiang? Ji was not a vegetarian. She easily avoided the vital parts, but in order to make it look like she was seriously injured, she purposely made the wound bigger and let the blood flow out. It looked very scary. In fact, as long as the bleeding was stopped and the wound was bandaged, it would be fine. Wei Si glanced at the arrowhead, then looked at Jiang Yu. For the first time ever, the back of Ji Yunshu's head disobeyed the order. Forgive me for not being able to comply with the Lord's orders. His voice sounded dry and hard, as if he were choking something in his throat. However, Jiang Nongqin could see that Wei Si's eyes were bloodshot. Ginger? Ji did not make things difficult for him. Then, Zishir and Nongqin will be in charge here. I'll hide my injuries for now. Is this intentional, my lord? Jiang Nongqin asked the question in her heart. At the same time, she felt an indescribable anger. Which villain was worth the Lord hurting herself to plot against? Who was worthy? Jiang? Ji said, "It's just a chess piece." Although she said that, the pain in her arms still made her frown slightly. Wei Ci became even quieter after hearing this. He only held Jiang Xiang in his hand. He just held Jiang Xiang's arm and loosened his grip. Jiang Nongqin did not ask any more. She trusted Jiang Xiang wholeheartedly. Jiang Xiang? Ji's injury was not fatal, but she was a little dizzy after losing so much blood. She leaned back and nestled in Wei Ci's arms. "Zixiao, carry me back." No one knew what was going on in his mind. He felt a long-lost familiarity from the Lord. This familiarity was no different from Her Majesty in his previous life. In a trance, Wei Ci saw the shadow of Her Majesty in his previous life. Even the scheming smile on her lips and the coldness in her eyes were exactly the same. Every time this happened, Wei Ci always felt that the person in front of him did not belong to the secular world. Her body was in the secular world, but her heart was out of it. She looked at everyone coldly, as if she was watching ants fight. Her eyes were full of contempt, mocking how naive and ridiculous the scheming of the people was. Wei Ci said, "Yes." The screen was removed. Jiang Xiang left the drill ground under the protection of the guards. Jiang Nongqin stayed behind to deal with the aftermath. When everyone heard that the assessment would continue, their faces were as colorful as a palette that had been overturned. The life and death of the main character was unknown. How could they have the mood to watch the assessment? However, Jiang Nongqin said, "My lord is highly skilled in martial arts. The thief only suffered superficial injuries. After being bandaged by the doctor, he is fine." Everyone was speechless. If he was really fine, why did he leave in a coma? The wound was on the left side of his chest. No matter how they looked at it, he did not look fine, let alone a superficial injury. Jiang Nongqin saw that she could not reason with him, so she used force to threaten him. This trick worked. The drill ground quietened down in an instant. Jiang Nongqin calmed the remaining examinees with a cold expression, indicating for them to continue with the assessment. The assassination of the Duke of Lanting was a big deal. These students had been protected by the academy for many years. They had not experienced the hardships of the wind and rain, so their hearts were not strong enough. Therefore, few of the remaining 20 students performed normally. However, their foundation was still there, and their scores were not bad. When the examiner announced the new round of scores, not many students cared about this. They were all concerned about Jiang Xiang. Ji and a few clever students turned their eyes to Feng Zhen, Feng Jin, and the others, hoping to infer from their expressions that Jiang Xiang was Ji's specific situation. Will the Duke of Lanting be fine? Sun Lan's tone was a little weak. Feng Yi said with certainty, "The Duke of Lanting will be fine." The two of them were no longer interning in the military camp. They were only students who had not graduated from the Golden Scale Academy. They could not be called Jiang Xiang. "Do your part well." Feng Yi added, "Father and the others have not panicked yet." "How can we panic?" In reality, Feng Yi was not sure what to say. His eyesight was excellent. He could see where the arrow was pierced. Even if it was not the center of the chest, it was not far away. The heart, brain, and throat were the three fatal points of the human body. The heart was fragile. Even a graze could kill. Little did he know that the arrow was indeed aimed at the heart, but at the last moment, Jiang Xiang grabbed it with her right hand. She even fiercely stabbed the arrowhead into her left shoulder to create the illusion that the wound was on her chest. "Zixiao, it hurts, Jiang Xiang." Ji hummed softly. There was a rare hint of coquettishness in her tone. Wei Ci did not answer and asked him to make a special appointment for Jiang Yan. Ji's trusted physician came over to clean her wound. The arrow was specially used by the soldiers in the military camp. The arrowhead had a special structure. When it was pierced into the flesh and pulled out, it could hook out the skin and flesh. Wei Ci was more worried about the filth on the arrowhead. It would be troublesome if it caused the sequelae of high fever and pus. History told him that many famous generals died like this. They did not die on the battlefield, but from the filth on their wounds. The sequelae he mentioned was called tetanus _ smiley face angle _ in the salted fish dimension. The physician bowed and said in a low voice, "I'm sorry to have offended you." After that, he took out a clean pair of scissors and cut off Jiang Xiang's sleeve and shoulder. After saying that, he took out a clean pair of scissors and cut off Jiang Xiang's sleeve and shoulder. Seeing the wound clearly, the physician gasped. "Jiang Xiang?" Ji leaned against the table and sat up. She bent her legs and said lazily, "I haven't even cried out in pain." "What's with that look?" The physician was speechless. She didn't cry out in pain? Then who was the one who shouted, "Zixiao, it hurts"? Her wound was already blooming, yet she was still so stubborn. I didn't expect her to be such a person. The physician used his excellent medical skills to help Jiang Xiang. Ji cleaned and stitched up the wound. After giving a few reminders, she left. Wei Ci was not a soft-hearted person, but Jiang Yusheng was not a soft-hearted person. But Jiang Xiang was a surprise to him. Seeing the bloody wound, all emotions disappeared. Only worry and heartache were left. The assassins this time, do you know who sent them, my lord? The students of the Golden Scale Academy, except for a few, were the orphans of soldiers who had died in battle. It was equivalent to the Lord raising them. Who would have thought that there would be a traitor among them? Who would actually wait for an opportunity to assassinate Jiang during such an important assessment? Ji? Zixiao, this is not important. Wei Ci's heart thumped. He had a vague ominous premonition. Was this targeting Jiang Xiang? Who was the mastermind behind Ji's assassination was actually not important. Could it be, Zixiao? When we were not paying attention, the Golden Scale Academy became a chess piece in the struggle between the various forces. Ji said, students of commoner origin still have a shallow foundation. I don't blame them. They are too insignificant and have no right to control themselves. Wei Ci understood after thinking for a while. Jiang Xiang? Ji asked again, do you know who the force behind the assassination of my students is? Wei Ci did not know, please enlighten me, my lord. Jiang Xiang? Ji laughed softly, it's the Liu family. Wei Ci was speechless, the Liu family? Yes, the Liu family. Jiang Xiang smiled lazily. Ji Yunshu smiled lazily. If news of the assassination were to spread, the Liu family would probably panic. Panic? Why would it be panic too? Unless, thinking of his lord's bad temper, Wei Ci suddenly understood. The Liu family didn't order the student to assassinate. Jiang Xiang? Ji said, Zixiao is smart. This student is a pawn they bribed. I don't know when he will come in handy. Wei Ci frowned. Since the Lord said so, it could be seen that this pawn was a hidden pawn for the Liu family. It would not be moved easily. Then who could it be? Who would use the eyes and ears that the Liu family secretly controls to assassinate the Lord and kill with a borrowed knife? Before he finished speaking, Wei Ci suddenly choked. His eyes met Jiang Xiang's. Ji's eyes. At that moment, her smile was like a flower. Chapter 1787. Wei Ci pursed his lips. Did he really think that he and Jiang Yi were in the same boat? When he and Jiang Shao looked at each other, his mind seemed to be sucked away by that pair of misty, deep eyes. At this moment, he forgot how to speak, and at the same time, forgot how to respond. Jiang Shao? Seeing his dazed look, Ji burst out laughing. Ignoring the injury on her shoulder, she got up and walked to Wei Ci. Her uninjured right hand caressed his face. The action was intimate, like a lover whispering softly, revealing an indescribable decadence, making Wei Ci's ears turn red. If this action was done by a hooligan, it would be frivolous. But the person in front of him was Jiang Shao. Ji. She and Wei Ci could be considered as an unregistered husband and wife. This intimate action added to the fun. Are you afraid of me, Zixiao? Jiang Shao? Ji's lips curled up. Wei Ci then realized that his lord's lips were very pale and thinner than usual. Afraid? Where did this come from? Wei Ci regained his senses and covered Jiang Shao with his warm and broad palm. Ji gently rubbed the back of her hand. I'm just a little confused. Why did you do this? Do you still remember what you promised before? Why did you put yourself in danger this time? In his previous life, Wei Ci might not have realized it, but in this life, he could see it very clearly. His lord was best at tricking people. For example, this time, wasn't the so-called mastermind behind the scenes the person in front of him? Wei Ci was not angry at her tricking people, but at her disregard for her own safety. She actually took the risk and came back with a body full of injuries. Jiang Shao? Ji heard the second half of the sentence and immediately felt guilty. She tried to retract her hand. Unexpectedly, Wei Ci, who had always been gentle, also became tough for once and grabbed her hand suddenly. The two of them were in a stalemate, looking into each other's eyes, neither willing to give in first. After a long time, Jiang Shao? Ji Xian was terrified. However, she would not admit that she was henpecked. How could loving, understanding, and respecting one's partner be henpecked? This time, Jiang Shao. Ji Xian wanted to say something soft, but Wei Ci pursed his lips tightly and poked her wound with his other free hand. Jiang Shao, who had always been unflinching even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of her. Ji Yunshu gave him face and had to hide for a while. She said softly, Zixiao, it will hurt. She thought that by acting coquettishly and giving in to Wei Ci, she would be able to pass this hurdle. She did not expect Wei Ci to have his own tricks up his sleeve. Is my lord really in pain? A certain someone who could keep a straight face even when his hand was severed showed a sincere expression and nodded his head as if he was pounding garlic. She was a patient now. No matter what she had done before, the most important thing now was to coax her and care for her. Let's just forget about the danger I put myself in previously. Can't we just pretend that it never happened? However, Wei Ci said, it turns out that my lord also has a body of flesh and blood. You've never cultivated the indestructible body of Vajra, and you're not as invulnerable as immortals. Ginger? Ji Yunshu curled her lips and said something perverted, if it's really invulnerable, Wen Zheng and the rest will cry. If it was really invulnerable, young master wouldn't be able to make it, let alone make it. Wei Ci was a righteous boy, did he not hear Zhang's voice? He suppressed his anger and said to her, all right, since my lord still has a body of flesh and blood, there will be a moment of death. If the enemy's arrow did not pierce into your shoulder, but your heart or near your heart, based on the structure of the arrowhead just now, does my lord think that your heart will still be intact? If the heart is damaged, can you still live? On the drill ground, Ginger? Ji Yunshu pulled out the arrow without changing her expression. The wound was badly mangled by the barbs. The wound that was originally only the width of a finger was twisted by the barbs to the width of 3 fingers. The flesh was even scratched out. Wei Ci felt pain just by looking at it. Even if she did not even frown, his heart would ache. My lord's words carry enormous weight. why did you go back on your word this time? Who was the one who promised Wuxia that he would not mess around anymore and that he would not risk his life as a joke? Ginger? Ji Yunshu said, I have my reasons. Wuxia said, if I can't share your worries, what's the use of having me? My lord, why can't you let me do the things that you must do? Ginger? Ji Yunshu smiled helplessly, let you experience today's assassination? Zixiao, you'll lose your life. How do you know that I'm not willing to risk my life for you, my lord? Wuxia gritted his teeth and said, I'm willing. From my previous life to this life, I have never flinched. Even if my lord's injury is not enough to threaten your life, I'm willing to sacrifice my life for you. Ginger? Ji Yunshu frowned. Only then did she realize that Wuxia was really angry. Wuxia would not show his anger on his face when he was angry, but his anger was no less stressful than his emotional outbursts. I suddenly have a question. In my previous life, did His Majesty really reach the end of his lifespan by riding the dragon to the sky? Wuxia did not know why he thought of this. The more he thought about it, the more upset he felt. As intelligent as he was, he could not sort out these messy emotions. Did he risk his life again? Not waiting for Ginger? Ji Yunshu opened her mouth. Wuxia said with reddened eyes, no matter if His Majesty really rode the dragon to the sky or if he once again risked his life to clean up the Qing dynasty and eliminate dissidents for His Highness Jiangyan. No matter if His Majesty is dead or alive, Wei Zixiao is really dead. He committed suicide. Ginger? Ji Yunshu's expression was solemn. My lord, you naturally have your reasons for doing this. As a subject, I shouldn't ask too much. But Wuxia is not only your subject, but also your lover, right? Wuxia asked her, if my lord makes the first move, do you think I will die for my lord or for my love? Ginger? Ji Yunshu said, I have to do it. But you can remind me, Wuxia continued, this batch of students from the Golden Scale Academy is my lord's painstaking effort, and also my lord's. Because of you, I hope that they will be safe and sound more than anyone else. They are related to the future plans, and even more so to my lord's great cause. You only need to reveal one or two things, and I will naturally follow your footsteps. In my lord's heart, is Wuxia a smart person or a fool? If he was a smart person, with one or two clues, would he not be able to guess that Ginger? Ji Yunshu's thoughts would not be able to keep up with her footsteps? If he was a fool, even if Ginger? Ji Yunshu told him the detailed information, he would not be able to understand her intentions. Ginger? Ji Yunshu did not give Wuxia any time to react. Wuxi's previous words were still lingering in her mind. In her previous life, not long after the news of her riding the dragon to bury the heavens spread, Wuxia committed suicide. Whether his suicide was forced by the situation or voluntary, or both, the result was obvious. Wuxia was dead. But what about her previous life? Was she really dead? She analyzed the information that Wuxia had revealed and combined it with her understanding of herself. Ji Yunshu felt that it was unlikely. Perhaps it was another entrapment. However, this entrapment was a failure. It lost Wei Tsong the First's high-spirited spirit, and also Wuxi's life. When this guess appeared in her mind, there was a faint but not negligible stabbing pain in her chest. After a long time, Ginger? Ji Yunshu half-squatted in front of Wuxia, her line of sight level with him. She leaned forward, and their foreheads touched. She sighed softly, I'm sorry, there won't be a next time. A mere 11 words lightly brushed away the suppressed uneasiness, anger, and bitterness in Wuxi's heart. In the face of this person, his principles and bottom line were like a fart. My lord does not need to apologize. Wuxi's voice lowered, but because of his anger just now, it was a little hoarse. Zixiao, you want to see Ginger? Ji? Wei Si's eyes suddenly widened, as if he had received a great shock. Ginger? Ji put her hands on his shoulders and laughed softly. The person that the world knows of will always be labeled as Lu Shi. Ji Yunchu's hand touched the base of his ear, her fingers pinching his bloodshot earlobe as she said, "But, Zixiao, the name that you want to hear, the person that you want to see, from the beginning to the end, isn't it, Jiang? Ji? I want to tear off the identity of Lu Shi and restore the original name that we have been familiar with for many years." When she said this, Wei Si suddenly understood the intention of the other party's scheme. The familiar entrapment, the familiar killing many birds with one stone. Her meticulous calculations and extremely coquettish operation had never disappointed Wei Si. Jiang? Ji Yunshu said, "Most of the students in the Golden Scale Academy come from commoners, not even poor families. More than half of them have no parents and are all alone. Without relatives or family background, they can only rely on themselves. Unfortunately, they are just ordinary people and can only be pawns in other people's games. Everything is beyond their control. I said before, I don't blame them. If you want to blame someone, blame those who have extended their claws too far." Wei Si woke up from the quarrel just now and immediately went into work mode. "My lord, you mean, find a reason to flare up and chop off these claws. There's no excuse more powerful than the fact that I was assassinated and almost lost my life." Jiang? Ji Yunshu snorted coldly, "I originally just wanted to get rid of these guys and at the same time beat up the others who didn't have time to act so that they would know their place. Most of the students in the Golden Scale Academy will be involved in politics. Whether they stay in the imperial court or be appointed as local officials, they have unlimited potential. Controlling them is equivalent to controlling the resources that they will have in the future. How could I allow this to happen? If I let those people have their way, will the imperial examinations in the future be for me and the country to nurture talents or for them to choose eagle claws?" Wei Si said, "But my lord chose Lady Lu. Lady Lu should have controlled that student a long time ago and used him as a hidden pawn that might come in handy in the future. In the end, my lord dug him out and even secretly impersonated Lady Lu to give the student the order to assassinate me. Fishing for justice, killing with a borrowed knife, and finally making Lady Lu take the blame for the assassination." Jiang? Ji Yunshu said, "There's a reason why I chose Lady Lu. I want to make a clean break with them and at the same time, make them put away their ambitions." Making a clean break with them was to restore the name, Jiang? Ji, and make them put away their ambitions because of my children? Jiang? Ji Yunshu spread her hands and said, "Yes, I still don't have any children, which made Lady Lu ambitious and have ideas that they shouldn't have. They set up more than one hidden weapon in the Golden Scale Academy. They bribed a few more outstanding students who didn't have outstanding results. Those students have a promising future. Their studies aren't top-notch, but their temperaments are suitable for officialdom and they will be able to do well in the future. If they can stand firm in the imperial court, wouldn't it be equivalent to Lady Lu controlling real power? If my children can be born and grow up in the future, it'll be fine. If they don't or die young, they'll definitely advise me to adopt one. If I'm unfortunate enough to die, Lady Lu will benefit the most in the end." The people of Lady Lu that Wei Si had met before appeared in his mind. This idea is the idea of clan leader Lu Heng? The previous clan leader Lu Heng? Cheng Si? Fu Na Shu? Since Lu Heng? Taunted Chu Song? Fu Na Shu? Kip Cun locust and collapsed? Locust blinked? Fu? Fu Kuhui? Swoosh sent health? In order not to affect Lady Lu, Lu Heng? Instigated by Miao Mei? Crotch? Now the clan leader of Lady Lu was Lu Heng, who was also Jiang. Ji Yunshu's cousin in this body. Wei Si and Lu Heng? Marriage? Hypocrisy? Nanny? Responsibility? Private hoisting reed? Jane? Hissing ridges and poking brimstone? On the contrary, the father and son were quite smart. Even if they had ambitions, they wouldn't give them to Jiang. Ji's weakness. Jiang? Ji Yunshu shook her head. It's not cousin brothers. The internal situation of the Lu family is a little complicated. This matter even implicates Guzhen, my stepmother. Why is Lady Guzhen also? Lady Guzhen will be involved because she also has ambitions. Ji Yunshu wanted to hide it, but thinking of her promise, she revealed a few words. However, her ambitions were not big at first. It was just that I fanned the flames and pushed her from behind. Wei Ci was dumbfounded. 3 questions lingered in his mind. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? Why did the Lord plot against Lady Guzhen as well? Killing many birds with one stone, taking care of Lady Lu, the restless aristocrats, and Guzhen? Guzhen was ambitious, but the Lord had secretly connived at her ambition to expand it. It was too magical. Jiang? Ji said with a gloomy face, Guzhen is Lady Guzhen and I am not Lu Shi. This reason is sufficient. Wei Ci was silent. This reason was indeed sufficient. Jiang? Ji continued, Guzhen's ambitions are not limited to being the Empress Dowager. I can give her endless glory and wealth, but a person's ambition is limitless. Once the seed of ambition sprouts, even without me adding fuel to the fire, Guzhen will reach this step sooner or later. I only treated her a little coldly, letting her have wealth but no real power to show off. After a year or two, she developed this kind of ambition. There was always a ravine between us. She knew that I was not the real Lu Shi, but a wandering ghost who made a deal with her. She kept my secret, and I gave her glory and wealth. In the end, this deal was not solid. Wasn't she worried that I would secretly kill her once I gained power? After all, only the dead can keep their mouths shut, and the living cannot be trusted. Wei Ci said, Lady Guzhen was worried about this, so, Jiang? Ji said, so she betrayed me. Wei Ci's face turned cold. Jiang? Ji said, Guzhen is very close to the old farts of Lady Lu. I heard that she is especially fond of the children of Lady Lu. Without further explanation, Wei Ci understood everything. If I touch Lady Guzhen, I'm afraid it will be hard to explain to Mengheng and Nie Sun, Jiang. Ji smiled contemptuously. I revert to Jiang. Ji's identity is enough. Not to break away from Lady Lu, but to become an independent clan. Once she reverted to her surname, she would slowly deal with these people. Jiang? Ji had no feelings for Guzhen. The two of them were just collaborators from the beginning. Guzhen was the first to have ambitions. Jiang? Ji was just taking the opportunity to add fuel to the fire, to make her ambitions cross the line, and then find an excuse to kill her. Chapter 1788. Zixiao, do you think I'm too heartless? Ji, she would also care about her image in the eyes of her partner. No matter what, Lu Shi's body doesn't belong to me. After I took over the body, I schemed against Lu Shi's family again and again. In the eyes of ordinary people, Jiang Zizi was the most beautiful woman in the world. Ji Yunshu's actions were indeed too much. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was heartless. However, Wei Ci said, my lord did not scheme for no reason, did he? In terms of affection, my lord has done more than enough. Ginger? She had used Lu Shi's body, but she wasn't the one who murdered Lu Shi. She had only taken a body that didn't belong to anyone. She didn't hide this from Lu Shi's family, from Lu Shi, Gu Min, Gu Zhen, Madame Hu, and even Lu Zhao. Ji offers benefits. If you don't make a sound while enjoying the benefits, what's the point of making a fuss after? His Highness had always been a person of her word. Whatever she said, she would definitely do it. Since she had promised Gu Zhen that she would give her wealth and glory, she would not go back on her word. In the end, Gu Zhen was not satisfied with what she had. She wanted more, to control real power, and even to manipulate Jiang Ji. Who knew what she would ask for in the future? How could there be such a good thing in the world? If she dares to push her luck, don't blame the Lord for falling out with her. In the words of a brainless fan, Ginger Ji was Wei Si's principle, worldview, and bottom line. No one could cross it. So, how could Wei Si feel that his lord was heartless? If she was truly heartless, not to mention Lu Shi and Lu Zhao, the entire Lu family would have been defeated by her, just like in her previous life. In his previous life, the Lu family was also one of those who wouldn't die if they didn't court disaster. They only had themselves to blame for the ending. Zixiao's words are always in my heart. She and Wei Si had known each other for more than 10 years. Over the years, the two of them had only blushed twice, and each time it only lasted for a few hours. Ji Tailang was courting death. They were all adults. They wouldn't play the "you're heartless, you're unintentional, you're being unreasonable" game, and they wouldn't let the misunderstanding worsen. It was fine as long as such a huge misunderstanding was cleared up. Why should they hide it and cause an even bigger conflict in the end, driving a wedge between them? Therefore, the alarm was lifted. Not long after, Ji became indecent again. She flirted with Wei Si with a cheeky face. Wei Si saw that she was injured, so he took advantage of her verbally. He turned a blind eye and let Jiang Yu do whatever she wanted. Ji is mischievous. The relationship between the two of them became even more harmonious. They were lovey-dovey with each other, not knowing that the outside world had been invaded by Jiang Qianqian. The news of Ji Ye's assassination caused a huge uproar. The reactions of the various forces were different. Some were doubtful, some were worried, and some were guilty. Huang Song belonged to the group of skeptics. There was nothing he could do. Back then, Ji Yunshu had used the tactic of being attacked by an assassin to harass Huang Song. Even after so many years, Huang Song was still traumatized by this matter. He asked around for information, even if he knew Jiang Yu. Ji Zhen was assassinated, but he still felt that it was unreal. Ginger. When Ji Yi was assassinated, Feng Zhu was also present and witnessed the entire process. He said to Huang Song, "Even though I don't know the exact extent of her injuries, judging from the amount of blood she's lost, it's most likely serious." Huang Song didn't know how to answer. Even with his friends as witnesses, he still felt that the news was a little unreal. He said, with Lanting's martial arts skills, "I don't think we can make a conclusion too early." Thinking back to the Huangshui meeting years ago, when the feudal lords went to the imperial city of Qinzhou to protect the emperor, Huang Song still remembered what happened at that time. The one who left the deepest impression was Jiang Yu. Ji Yi used a ceremonial tablet to dismember the demon's body during the court meeting. That demon was dismembered in front of Huang Song. How could a killer who could use a ceremonial tablet as a murder weapon be seriously injured by a student who hadn't even passed the graduation exam? Ridiculous. Based on my understanding of Lanting, who knows what evil tricks she's up to this time? Huang Song shook his head and said, "She hasn't led troops to fight many battles in recent years, but she used to be a fierce general who galloped on the battlefield and came in and out of tens of thousands of troops at will. She was a ruthless person who could kill several enemy generals in a row. Even if she's cultivated her character these years, the vigilance in her bones hasn't disappeared. No matter how powerful the assassin is, he can't take her life, right?" He gambled all his wealth on Jiang Yu. Ji Yi was definitely up to something. The outside world is abuzz. One moment, it said that the Duke of Lanting was assassinated. The next moment, it said that she was seriously injured and died of illness. Some people are suspicious, but some people believe it. Huang Song sneered, this is Lu Shi's usual trick. Whoever believes it is unlucky. Didn't she use this trick to get rid of a few stubborn aristocratic families in Nanxing not long ago? For example, the unlucky Nan family of Fenzhou. Not only did they fail in the assassination, but they were also killed. She even baited them, causing their entire family to die with them. Feng Ju laughed. Using the same trick again? Huang Song said, it doesn't matter if the method is old, as long as it works. Look at what she's doing. There are still stupid fish that can't wait to take the bait. Feng Ju and Huang Song's deduction was based on Jiang Yu's strength. However, others didn't think so. They only heard that Jiang Yu was good at fighting. However, they had no idea how good Ji was. Jiang Yu? Ji Yi was assassinated in public. The bleeding was not fake, and the location of the wound could not be faked. The arrowhead even had a special barb in the military. The news of her dying of illness was fake, but it was true that she was seriously injured by the assassination. It was also true that she had no children. No matter how powerful she was, could she turn the tables? The Lu family was in chaos. Lu Heng was extremely disappointed in the room full of elders and famous seniors. Lu Heng knew that the Lu family was trying to rope in the students of the Golden Scale Academy, but he didn't know that these old fellows would be so daring. At the beginning, we agreed to rope in that group of commoner students for the sake of the family's future. Didn't our word sound so good? Lu Heng was almost going mad with anger. This news even reached the ears of his recuperating father. Egg punishment? Yao Yu? Huh? Salty? Face wash? Play? Arrogance? Instant brilliance trick? Jia Xin? Xiongtu soil? Dazzling mu yi mei qing yen jing wei xia yi mu yi mu yi mu yi mu yi mu yi mu screen? Dan Jun. These elders had extremely high prestige in the clan. When had they ever been scolded by a junior like this? They and Lu? Harass Gaizi? Sick? Pay a visit? Knock on the stool and endure the fading of the apron. What's more, the assassination was not done by us. Someone must have framed us. Lu Heng laughed in anger. Framing him? Without evidence, how can you make people believe that you didn't do it? Lu Heng said. Lu Shi sighed, however, has evidence to prove that this matter has something to do with the Lu family and you. Pray to the gods and Buddha that Lu Shi is safe and sound. He will forgive you on account of his uncle. If anything happens to her, the entire Lu family will be buried with her, including all of you. Lu Heng's words were too impolite. The elders could not keep their faces. Lu? Luck? Xiao Xian family? Tu Tui? Ji Zhao's mother? School? One of them said, isn't it good if something really happens to Lu Shi? At least Lu Shi isn't as fickle as this girl. Lu Shi still cared about the family, but Lu Shi didn't care about the family. From Jiang? After Ji Yi split the sect, the more the elders thought about it, the more uncomfortable they felt. Jiang? It was fine that Ji Yi didn't take care of the family, but she suppressed them both openly and secretly. Gu Zhen was her legal mother in name, but she was also restrained. How could there be such an unfilial descendant in the world? Another person said, if Lu Shi takes over, he will only be left with a lowly status and bloodline bastard, Lu Zhao. Lu Shi has deep feelings for Gu Min and hates Lu Zhao, a bastard. He also made it clear that he wouldn't let Lu Zhao inherit the family business. When the time comes, us old fellows will choose an outstanding legal son from the family to pass on to him. The Lu family's direct descendants are much better than Lu Zhao's. Most importantly, Gu Zhen supported this plan. With the tacit understanding between Gu Zhen and them, they chose a few outstanding and talented direct descendants of the Lu family and sent them to Guzhen. On the surface, it was said that Guzhen felt lonely and that it would be more lively with the children, but in reality, it was to be friendly to the future crown prince. Since Jiang Ji was stingy and refused to give Guzhen real power and honor, she used her own schemes to get it. The children were young and easy to control. Compared to Jiang, Ji was much better. At the same time, it gave Guzhen a greater sense of security. Lu Heng sneered. These old fellows were really old. Otherwise, how could they be so naive and ridiculous? No matter how much Lu Shi hated the bastard, he was still his biological son. If he really had the family business, why would he pass it on to someone else's child? Moreover, Jiang Ji was not dead yet. Lu Heng knew very well that once these old fellows were exposed, they would definitely not be a match for his cousin, Lu Shi. You can continue to daydream. Don't drag your family to death with you, the elder said. The elder said, whether you believe it or not, the assassination was not ordered by us. They had plots and calculations, but they would also wait for the right time. How could they do it without thinking? Lu Heng saw that their reactions did not seem to be fake. His heart gradually sank. If it was not these old fellows who ordered the Lu family to arrange the pawns, then who could it be? It was impossible for the pawns to assassinate Jiang without any instructions. Ji was not complaining that his name was too long. Investigate thoroughly. We must get rid of the Lu family. Lu Heng took a deep breath. If it did not work, he could only cut off his tail to survive. At the same time, the other families were also confused. This was because Lu Heng had sent people to investigate and found that the pawns arranged by the Lu family had also contacted several other families. Although those families did not know about this, they were framed just like that. Who exactly framed the Lu family could not be found out. What a joke. Jiang Ji had directed and acted out such a good show. Of course, he would not leave a bug for others to turn the tables. After playing people to death in one go, how could he give people a chance to turn the tables? Apart from these families, the families that had secretly extended their claws into the Golden Scale Academy were also afraid. Some people were terrified as soon as they heard the news, but there were also people who held the idea of taking a gamble and turning a bicycle into a motorcycle. What if Jiang Ji didn't find out about them? They had spent a lot of energy and money to buy and nurture the hidden pawns. It would be a pity to give up just like that. Because of this little bit of thinking, they brought a fatal disaster upon themselves. After a few more days, the graduation exams for the students of the Golden Scale Academy were all over. Because of Jiang Ji's assassination had caused too much of a ruckus. No one dared to cause trouble for the rest of the exams, and this year's graduation exams were successfully completed. The final results would only be out in a few days, followed by the graduation ceremony. Do you think the Lanting Guild won't appear on that day? The students discussed in private. They hoped that Jiang would appear. Ji would appear to give them more weight, but they were afraid of another assassination. It's hard to say. These days, Wanzhou is in a state of panic. The atmosphere at home is heavy and tense. I don't even want to go back. Jiang? As long as Ji didn't appear in front of the public, they wouldn't know the specific situation. Until the day the results were released, there was an earth-shattering development. Chongqing ran to the Feng mansion early in the morning to find Feng Yi. The latter had just finished breakfast and was practicing boxing. Brother Rongli, what day is it today? You still have the leisure to practice boxing? If you don't go now, you won't be able to squeeze in later. Chongqing grabbed Feng Yi's hand and pulled him out. She nagged, the results are released today. Brother Rongli, aren't you curious? Feng Yi was rather relaxed. He said, "What's the hurry? Sooner or later, the scores won't change." Today was the day the results were released. It would be uncomfortable for them to squeeze in with the crowd. It would be better to wait for the crowd to disperse before going. Chongqing stomped her feet angrily. "I'm worried about Brother Rongli. I want to be the first to know." Feng Yi smiled. "But I don't want the precious Chongqing to waste her energy squeezing in with the crowd. I'll go with you after lunch." Under Feng Yi's comfort, Chongqing managed to calm down. The two of them hadn't said a few words when Sun Lan hurried over. "Did Lan also ask me to see the results?" Sun Lan walked as if she was flying. She had not even caught her breath. "What results?" "Something big happened." Feng Yi said, "What happened?" Sun Lan said, "Lord Lanting woke up." "That's a good thing." Sun Lan said, "If that's the case, it's certainly a good thing. But Lord Lanting. Sigh, I don't even know how to address him now." Feng Yi and Zhang were at a loss. How to address him? Naturally, it was Lord Lanting. Soon, Feng Yi knew why Sun Lan said that. Last night, in the middle of the night, Lord Lanting, who was rumored to be seriously injured and in a coma, woke up. As a woman with a mythical aura, Jiang Yi was able to turn misfortune into fortune. This was also the reason why Jiang Yi could turn misfortune into fortune this time. During the days she was in a coma, Jiang Yi met her teacher in her dream. In her dream, Ji Yunshu met her teacher, the legendary immortal who had given her the divine book. The old immortal told her who had sent the assassins to kill her at the drill ground. The two of them talked for a few days, but they still wanted more. Finally, the old immortal said to her with pity, "If you don't wake up now, I'm afraid you won't wake up." "Master, what do you mean?" Just as Lord Lanting finished speaking, the old immortal swept her away with a gust of wind. After a while, she woke up. When she woke up, she found arsenic in the ointment brought by the maid. If the old immortal had not woken her up, she would not have woken up again. He captured the maid and interrogated her. After following the clues, he found out that the maid was arranged by Guzhen's mistress. Naturally, Lord Lanting did not believe it. He sent people to investigate his mistress and found out that she was indeed disloyal. Since then, Lord Lanting was dubious about the contents of the dream. He sent people to follow the clues and found out that the content was exactly the same as what the old immortal said. According to the information, the Liu family and Guzhen's mistress were not the only ones involved. There were also a few other families. All of them had concrete proof. Forget about the others, his own family was also plotting against her. His mistress also wanted her dead. Lord Lanting was disheartened and lamented that there was no place in this vast world that could accommodate her. The old immortal appeared in his dream again and said that she was a child bestowed by heaven. He gave her the surname Jiang and the name ? What? Gee. Hearing this news, the three Feng brothers looked at each other. Jiang. Gee. Chapter 1789. In Salted Fish's dimension, to change one's name, one only needed to bring their ID card, household register, application report, and other documents to the household registration office to apply for a change of registration. If it was Jiang Ji's dimension was even simpler. She just needed to log into the Heavenly Brain's personal account and apply. However, the current era was not so convenient. Not only was the process cumbersome, but he also had to face many obstacles and even public criticism. People often say, don't change your name when you're in a position, and don't change your surname when you're in a position. One's name was given by one's parents. Changing one's name without permission was enough to be labeled as unfilial. People would not change their name easily. Of course, looking at the history books, there were many people who changed their names, but they were all special cases. For example, in order to avoid disasters or the pursuit of enemies, they had no choice but to conceal their identity. For example, a person in a higher position bestowed a name and surname. This usually happened to slaves with a lower social status. Bestowing a name and surname was a form of glory and not a way to sever one's roots. For example, to avoid the monarch, most people would change their name and rarely would they change their surname. For example, a man would marry into the woman's family to continue the family line and continue the family line. In addition to these relatively common examples, there were some that were relatively rare. A typical example was Jiang Qin. Ji Hao had defeated the 3 tribes of the northern borderline. In order to accelerate the assimilation of these foreign people and to assimilate their culture, Old Master Sun Wen had implemented many targeted policies in the past few years in the northern borderline, enticing them with benefits, enticing them with beautiful words, and intimidating them with force. Gradually, many people of the 3 races in the northern borderline assimilated their surnames into the Chinese language. After tasting the sweetness, more and more people of foreign races did the same. For them, surnames weren't that important. If they could live a better life by changing their names, then so be it. That was what the people of the 3 tribes of the northern borderline thought. Some people who had learned the culture of the Central Plains saw this and felt heartache and helplessness at the same time. The imperial court of the northern borderline and tens of thousands of nobles were killed by Jiang Fei. When Ji Yi slaughtered them all, Beijiang would be completely finished. Unless Jiang. With Ji Yanran's downfall and the many families in the Central Plains divided, the northern borderline would have been devoured cleanly. After going through all these situations of changing names and surnames, Jiang? Which category did Ji belong to? She wasn't one of them. She resolutely chose to sever ties with the Liu family just because her stepmother tried to poison her and her family plotted to take over her business. Even if the person who bestowed the name and surname was an old immortal, a name bestowed by the heavens, it could not change the fact that she was fickle and resolute in this matter. His biological father, Liu Shi, was still alive. Ji Yunshu chose to change her name despite Liu Shi and Liu Zhao's attitude. Did she ask for their opinion? I really don't have any opinion on this matter. I've long been mentally prepared for this. As he spoke, Liu Shi wore a green and brown Confucian robe. His wide sleeves were tied up with his sleeves and he held a watering can in his hand. He stood leisurely by the window, tending to the flowers. The fence outside the courtyard was surrounded by many precious flowers, and the fragrance of the flowers filled the air. Liu Zhao followed behind Liu Shi and passed him a pair of bug exterminators. The father and son enjoyed a leisurely afternoon together. But elder sister, this matter is too big. I heard that there have been elders of the clan coming to look for father these 2 days. A faint smile hung on Liu Zhao's lips. Several years had passed, and the immaturity on his face had completely faded away. He had transformed into a handsome young man. Yeah, I've been blocked by them for the past 2 days, so I don't dare to go out to visit family and friends. Liu Shi plucked the bugs off the flowers and leaves. He treasured the flowers and plants very much. His heart ached when the bugs gnawed a hole in them. Liu Zhao said, he's trying anything he can find in an emergency. As far as Liu Zhao knew, Liu Shi had long stopped caring about these matters. In the past, Liu Shi could still use his identity as a father to persuade Jiang. Ji, now that things are out in the open, it's still uncertain which of these 2 drama queens will call the other a tyrant. Liu Zhao wasn't very clear about the inside story, but he knew Liu Shi and Jiang Yu. Their relationship was not as loving father and filial daughter as the outside world thought. If it weren't for the fact that some occasions were unavoidable, this pair of plastic father and daughter would probably have gone to never see each other in life, never bump into each other in death. Liu Shi was fine. Ji Ku did not want to call someone father every day. In terms of real age, they were about the same. Why did she have to be a generation lower than him? Therefore, it was useless for the elders of the Lu family to harass Lu Shi. Lu Shi smiled and said, "How can they not be anxious when your sister is so serious? Even if you are in a desperate situation, you have to try anything." Lu Zhao pursed his lips and asked his father worriedly. Did Ji Ku really do that to Lu Shi and her stepmother? Lu Shi asked Lu Zhao to pass him a pair of scissors. He carefully cut off the excess leaves so that the flowers could bloom better. He said while cutting, "If you were a gardener and saw the messy branches and leaves in the yard, would you pull out the roots of these plants? Of course not. If they are messy, they can be pruned. Why would they be uprooted?" Lu Zhao understood what Lu Shi was trying to say. "Father, do you mean that Ji Ku just wants to prune the messy branches? She doesn't want to catch them all at once?" Lu Shi straightened his upper body and looked at the fenced flowers for a moment. Catch them all at once? Maybe she wants to, but it's not now. Lu Shi smiled. First of all, the time is not ripe. Second of all, these shrubs have deep roots and leaves. Ji Ku only has a pair of scissors in her hand. She can't cut them all at once. It's better to take it slow. If she can make them what she wants, that would be the best. If she can't, she can wait until they are fully grown. Lu Zhao felt a chill run down his spine. Once again, he understood that he was not as good as the two actors. Don't rush for quick success. Taking it slow is the right way to go. Your sister knows this very well. How can those idiots out there be a match for her? You should learn from them. Don't be fooled by them. Lu Shi sighed. Outsiders say that your sister is very good at martial arts and can defeat thousands of soldiers. They don't know that attacking the city is the best strategy. Attacking the heart is the best strategy. People with brute force are not scary. At most, they are just a knife that can be used to kill people. The scary ones are people like your sister, who are strong and good at killing people. You can't mess with them. Lu Zhao nodded. Is it the same for my stepmother and Lu Shi? It's not just Lu Shi and your stepmother. The other families are also her targets. Lu Zhao was confused, which made Lu Shi a little angry. This son of his was originally quite smart, but he hid his incompetence and pretended to be a pig to eat a tiger. Now he had really turned into a pig, and his brain made people anxious. Lu Shi gave him a detailed analysis. Only then did Lu Zhao completely understand Jiang Qinghe. Ji's entire plan. At the same time, he also understood that it was his stepmother, Lu Shi, or Jiang who betrayed him first. Ji Zhuxin was at the front. Lu Shi sighed. You're also one of the few people she cares about. If you keep your heart still, she won't touch you. What if my heart changes? Then, my next target will be you. Even so, Lu Zhao still felt a little scared. Sister won't eliminate Lu Shi and the other families, but what will she do to stepmother? Lu Shi said calmly, the stepmother you mentioned is my second wife. Even if your sister changed her name, she wouldn't be able to kill her stepmother without my permission. Most likely they had a falling out, so your stepmother could behave herself and be Mrs. Lu Shi. If she still doesn't know her place, your sister might ask me to divorce her and remove her identity as Mrs. Lu Shi. Without her status as a stepmother, wouldn't it be easy to kill her? It had to be said that Lu Shi's love for Jiang Ji's judgment was very accurate. No matter how the outside world objected and ridiculed him, Jiang Yusheng would never change his mind. Ji stubbornly changed her name and surname. No matter how fiercely the outsiders objected, it was useless. Even her biological father, Lu Shi, did not stand up to object to his daughter's behavior. What could the outsiders do? Not long after she announced the news, Gu Zhen, who was temporarily imprisoned, could not take it anymore and insisted on seeing Jiang in person. Gu Zhen was not here to admit her mistake. She was here to quibble. Ginger? Ji Bai took some time out of his busy schedule to meet her. He wanted to give her a warning so that Gu Zhen would not step on her bottom line. For the sake of Nia Sun and Meng Heng, Jiang Qinghong was willing to help. Ji still did not want to do anything to Gu Zhen. You said it before, why are you going back on your words now? Gu Zhen had been under house arrest for a few days. She had removed all her silk and satin. She no longer had any pearls, hairpins, or gems in her hair. She looked very plain and haggard. Ginger? Ji didn't even bother to roll her eyes. She said, I'm not the one who broke my promise. Gu Dai was so angry that her face turned livid. If it wasn't you, then who locked me up here? I'm also your stepmother, your biological aunt. You and I both know that you're nothing. Jiang Ji sneered. I promised you back then that as long as you help me hide it, I'll give you endless glory and wealth. Let me ask you, haven't I given you enough all these years? You spend more than 10,000 strings of coins every year. I don't even have a shortage of military expenses. You've done your best. How have you treated me? What exactly are the identities of those little brats from the Lu family? Gu Zhen did not panic at all. She quibbled, Heng and Sun have been separated from me since they were young. Now that they have their own families and have their own wives and children, they are not close to me, their mother. Your father lives alone all year round. I just feel that the house is deserted. I saw that those few children were quite pleasing to the eye, so I placed them by my side to raise and take care of them to relieve my boredom. Is such a small matter worth being so suspicious of? Jiang? Ji sneered and asked, my two cousins are not close to you. They are all grown up, but their sons and daughters are still young. If you really feel lonely, why don't you raise your own granddaughters and grandchildren by your side to relieve your boredom? Instead, you raise the children of the Lu family? You married father to be his second wife. But other than that, what relationship do you have with the direct descendants of the Lu family? Not raising her own grandchildren, but raising children who were not related by blood at all. This was called relieving boredom? Gu Zhen still wanted to defend herself. But Ji lost her patience. I can only give you glory and wealth. Other than this, she should not even think about anything else, let alone control Jiang Ji. Ji. Gu Zhen meets Jiang. Ji became serious. She even unceremoniously tore down her hypocritical immunity. She could not help but sneer. The glory and wealth that you speak of is just a huge sum of money as charity? Jiang? Ji said, and the position of the future Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager with no power is just an old lady with some status. Doesn't she have to listen to you? Jiang? Ji laughed. You seem to be very satisfied with the Empress Dowager back then. Why are you dissatisfied now? Back then, she only sought a position that was below one person and above tens of thousands of people. Now, she wanted to be above tens of thousands of people. Jiang? Ji's scheme was true, but it was also true that Gu Zhen took the risk out of desperation and poisoned her. Did she really think that by poisoning her and supporting the Lu family's children, she could be the Empress Dowager who had real power over tens of thousands of people? Did she really think that Lu Shi and Lu Zhao were dead? Or did she have a whole set of other tricks up her sleeve? Jiang? Ji was very disappointed. I thought you were a smart woman. I didn't expect you to be a smart woman. Compared to Gu Min, you are not just one level lower. She will fight for the greatest benefits for herself within the limits, but you will only play a bad hand. She did not make a move on Lu Shi and took care of Lu Zhao largely because of Gu Min. Do you really think that no one knows your true colors? Ji did not look at Gu Zhen's livid face. She mocked, from the first time I met you, I knew. When I hinted to you that I would give you the glory and status that Lu Shi couldn't give you, and you accepted me because of this and didn't pursue Lu Shi, whom you had watched grow up, I knew what kind of person you were. Could it be that calling you mother and bowing to you as a junior all these years really gave you the illusion that I really treated you as my mother? Jiang? Ji spoke so rudely that Gu Zhen's face turned even more livid. It was so dark that ink could almost drip out. Stop quibbling. I dare to say this to you because I have all the evidence. Gu Zhen stopped pretending. She laughed sinisterly. Why? You want to kill me to silence me? Why would I? You are still my father's second wife. How can you kill your elders? If I really wanted to kill you, I would naturally get my father to separate from you before I kill you. Ji looked down at Gu Zhen from above. Her cold voice did not carry the slightest emotion. In this life, we will not meet again until we reach the netherworld. This matter also spread out. Many people made the assertion that Jiang Ji would be angry at the face of the person who killed her mother. A stepmother was not a biological mother. A sentence of, "We will not meet again until we reach the netherworld," was enough. Jiang Ji threw Gu Zhen to Lu Shi and imprisoned her in Lu Shi's side courtyard. Without orders, she could not step out of the courtyard, let alone see outsiders. Jiang no longer took care of her daily necessities. Ji's private warehouse was now Lu Shi's. All the preferential treatment in the past was removed. All the people who served Gu Zhen were replaced by Jiang Ji's eyes and ears. Lu Shi was a retired person. His pension was enough, but he definitely could not squander it. After Gu Zhen was locked up, the next person to deal with was the Lu family. More and more people looked for Lu Shi in desperation. Lu Shi rejected all of them with the excuse of, "The child has grown up and he does not care about the child's choice." If someone said that Jiang Ji changed her name and did not recognize her ancestors, it was unfilial. His answer was even more unscrupulous. This name is bestowed by the heavens. A name bestowed by the heavens will not be punished. Isn't this more honorable than a name bestowed by the emperor on earth? Just as Lu Shi expected, Jiang Ji did not cut off the Lu family and left some leeway. Even so, the blow was also comprehensive. Those who should be killed, arrested, and exiled were exiled. Not only were the people cut off, but a large part of the property was also taken away. The staff of the Lu family were also demoted, and put on the blacklist. The Lu family was already like this. Needless to say, the other families were all greatly injured. This was not considered tragic. What was tragic was that someone secretly pushed Jiang Ji to hit them when they were down. Under the heavy suppression, their arms could not contend against the thighs. Jiang Ji repaired them miserably. Chapter 1790. To Jiang Ji. It was not that Gu Zhen did not resist Ji's methods, but no matter how hysterical she was, her voice could not be heard outside the walls of the courtyard. If there were no accidents, Gu Zhen would probably be trapped in this small courtyard for the rest of her life without freedom. "I want to see Lu Shi. Is that okay?" Gu Zhen's disheveled hair made her look like a crazy woman. However, she had been pampered for many years and her skin was as fair as snow. She looked much younger than her actual age. Even though there was still a trace of madness on her face, she still looked lovely. She sneered and said, "This is Lu Shi's mansion and I am Lu Shi's legal wife. It's not too much to see him." The courtyard where Gu Zhen lived was watched by people to prevent her from escaping, going out, or contacting strangers. Lu Shi was not a stranger. He was the owner of this mansion. As long as he wanted to, he had the right to see his wife. The servant reported that Gu Zhen wanted to see him. Lu Shi's expression was not the least bit surprised. He was calm and seemed to have expected it. "Father, do you want to go and see?" Lu Zhao's cheeks were bulging as he ate. He looked like the pet hamster that Lu Shi had gotten a while ago. Lu Shi carefully wiped his hands with a handkerchief and looked down. Let's see. We have been husband and wife for many years. Even if they were only husband and wife on the surface, there was no real relationship between them. You're here. Gu Zhen's eyes revealed some surprise. It was as if a drowning person had grabbed onto a life-saving straw. She tried hard to suppress her uncontrollable emotions. Her beautiful eyes were watery. She said, "Brother-in-law, are you going to let that evildoer humiliate me like this?" As a witness to Lu Shi and Gu Min's relationship, Gu Zhen knew this man's feelings for Gu Min the best. He would even love her because of her. Lu Shi walked past her and sat down on the mat next to the tea table. He looked around. This courtyard was originally the legal wife's residence. The decorations were not bad, but it was not as good as Jiang Ji's private residence. Ji had given Gu Zhen a private residence. Even though he did not deliberately pay attention to it, he had heard about Gu Zhen's life over the years. He was also surprised by her extravagance when they met occasionally. At this moment, Gu Zhen was very different from the little sister in his memory. However, perhaps that was Gu Zhen's true personality. Isn't it good here? Lu Shi did not look at the pleading look in Gu Zhen's eyes. He calmly stated the facts. Gu Zhen clenched her fists tightly. Her nails, which were painted with beautiful nail polish, dug deep into her palms. Her expression showed that she was about to explode. What's good about it? Gu Zhen still knew how to control her emotions. She gritted her teeth and said, "Brother-in-law, do you think it's good to imprison him here?" Lu Shi asked, "Do you think it's better to be alive or not? You're the only one who survived after poisoning her. If not for their friendship, Gu Zhen's corpse would have long been cold." Lu Shi didn't think that Jiang Zhou was a ginger. Ji Yunshu was a person who would care about the reputation of killing her mother. If she really cared, why would she kill her father on the battlefield? According to the history revealed by Gu Min, it clearly showed that Jiang Qinghu Ji Yunshu was a ruthless person. He killed his own father on the battlefield. Even the so-called biological father treated him this way, let alone a stepmother. It was rare for Gu Zhen to survive. Couldn't she be more obedient? "Brother-in-law, you've changed." Gu Zhen seemed to have suffered a great blow. Her face turned pale at Lu Shi's question. She said in disbelief, "So what if I poisoned her? Didn't she deserve to die? She killed your and big sister's dearest daughter. She killed Lanting and took over her identity. Now that she has achieved success and fame, she disdains Lanting's identity as a burden and throws it away. If big sister knew that your daughter was treated this way, would her soul in heaven be at ease? I only wanted to kill her to get back what I should have. What's wrong with that?" Lu Shi looked at Gu Zhen with a strange gaze. "If you really think that way, why didn't you kill her back then? Why wait until she's fully grown before talking about these big principles?" "I didn't kill her back then because I believed in big sister's words about having two souls in one body. I tried my best to treat this evildoer as Lanting, but I still couldn't do it." Gu Zhen said angrily, "She's just an evildoer who killed your own daughter. How can you still be so indifferent?" Lu Shi's lips curled into a mocking smile. He did not comment on Gu Zhen's words. "Even though you are Ah Min's most beloved sister, as your brother-in-law, I still have to say this. When it comes to petty tricks, you are indeed better than her. But other than that, you can't compare to her in any other way. If she were you, she would most likely stop while she's ahead and live a peaceful life. You don't have to do anything. In the future, you will be the Empress Dowager who will be supported by the world. What about now? I'm afraid you won't get anything." Lu Shi had only seen Gu Zhen turn a naturally good hand of cards into a pile of mush. Lu Shi was very clear about what Gu Zhen was thinking. She said a lot of nonsense, but at the end of the day, it was all for her own benefit. Lu Shi could see clearly what kind of feelings she had for Lu Shi, her 2 biological sons, and her biological grandchildren. When Gu Zhen heard the 2 words, sister, her face turned hideous for a moment. She hated it when others used the words, legal, to differentiate between her and Gu Min. When Gu Min was alive, Gu Zhen had to be careful to please her. She had to maintain her sisterly relationship to maintain Gu Min's high regard for herself. Gu Zhen was able to receive the treatment of a legitimate daughter even though she was not a legitimate daughter. That was because she had carefully served Gu Min, not because of the rewards bestowed by others. In the end, Gu Min had been dead for many years, but there were still people who used the word concubine to ridicule her. When the person who said this was Lu Shi, who had a deep love for Gu Min for more than 30 years, the negative emotions in her heart became even stronger. Lu Shi said, "Are you not satisfied with being an Empress Dowager?" Gu Zhen sneered and asked, "Why should I be satisfied with being an old lady who is supported by others but has no real power?" It was like she had never been satisfied with being a daughter of a concubine. She had racked her brains and worked hard to get some preferential treatment. If she had not worked hard to climb up in the past, she would have ended up like many of the Gu family's concubine daughters. Lu Shi frowned slightly. He did not expect Gu Zhen to say it so straightforwardly. Gu Zhen said, "The opportunity is right in front of me. Why should I let others continue to control my life? In the past, it was Gu Min. Now, it is the evildoer who has taken over Lu Shi's body. Is it interesting to be an Empress Dowager without real power? In the end, don't you still have to live according to others? Brother-in-law, I've had enough. I've really had enough of this kind of life. I've been watching Gu Min's face since I was 4 or 5 years old. I have to carefully please her to live a good life. If she gets angry, Mrs. Gu will secretly beat me and teach me a lesson. She is afraid that I will hurt her precious daughter. It has been like this since I was young. In the eyes of all of you, I am just a living doll that Gu Min likes." Hearing Gu Zhen belittle Gu Min like that, how could Lu Shi, who was obsessed with his wife, bear it? "Are you crazy? How can you slander Gu Min like that? Has she ever treated you badly?" Gu Min had never even raised her voice to her, let alone getting angry. She had always treated Gu Zhen as her own daughter. Gu Zhen said, "She is good to me, but didn't I get all this in exchange for being a lowly person?" Lu Shi said coldly, "There are some things that you don't even have the right to fight for, not to mention being a lowly person. She treats you well. Gu Zhen was treated badly. During the days that Ji Yu was imprisoned, her treatment plummeted. Her freedom was restricted, and no one was willing to talk to her. For the first few days, she had lived in fear of being killed. After that, she was depressed because of her narrow and claustrophobic life. Now, she was angry because of the conversation with Lu Shi. Her emotions were like a spring that had been suppressed to the extreme, bursting out and destroying her rationality. She said angrily, "Treats me well? If you treat me well, why would you find me those marriages? In the end, I would marry Meng Zhan under your suggestion. Lu Shi, my life has been almost ruined by you and Gu Min. Now, a demon has jumped out to humiliate me like this. It's really good." Lu Shi frowned and said, "Which of the marriages that Gu Min found for you were not good?" Gu Min had been very busy for Gu Zhen's marriage. She had personally screened the groom's family background, character, appearance, and style. Even her own mother was not as meticulous. For Gu Zhen, Gu Min, who was a history bum, had racked her brains and scratched her cheeks to recall her pitiful historical knowledge. She had carefully selected those candidates for several months. The only bad thing was that their status at that time was probably not high. This made Gu Zhen very uncomfortable. The different treatment that came with being a legal wife or a concubine made Gu Zhen mentally unbalanced. Now that Gu Min had prepared such a low-class marriage for her, it would be strange if she could feel good. However, Gu Zhen had never dared to disobey Gu Min. On the surface, she was very satisfied and kept saying, "Sister, make the decision." As for what she was thinking in her heart, only she knew. When Meng Zhan had taken a fancy to Gu Zhen's appearance and hoped that Lu Shi could matchmake him, Lu Shi had agreed. He felt that Meng Zhan's family background was better and was worthy of his wife and sister. He was willing to be a matchmaker. When Lu Shi revealed his intentions, Gu Zhen had also taken a fancy to Meng Zhan at first glance. The two of them hit it off. Why was it that he and Gu Min had ruined Gu Zhen's life? Is this really what you're thinking? Lu Shi felt sad for Gu Min. He had treated his sister wholeheartedly, but in the end, he had judged her in this way. Gu Zhen's brain was blown a few degrees colder by the cold wind. However, the words had already left her mouth and she could not take them back. Yes, that's what I think. She gritted her teeth and admitted it. She might as well shed all pretense of cordiality. She continued, "After Gu Min died, she entrusted me to you. Why did she not let me go after she died? You married me as your second wife, but all these years, you have maintained the title and relationship with me like when Gu Min was alive. You are my husband in name, but you have never touched me from the beginning to the end. What kind of husband and wife are you?" Gu Min had died and still stood between her and Lu Shi. She was like a ghost haunting her. "Your thinking is too extreme. You are crazy. Why don't you calm down for a few days and talk?" If they continued to talk, Lu Shi would be worried about Jiang. Ji did not kill Gu Zhen. He could not hold it in anymore. Jiang? Ji had never treated Lu Shi's interpersonal relationships as her own. Lu Shi, who had recovered the emotional memory of the system, would not treat humans as his own kind. If Lu Xiao was not the son of him and his lover, and Gu Zhen was his lover's sister, how could he have so much patience? "Brother-in-law, do you think I am wrong? I married you for the sake of our child and your safety. I was justifiably protecting you from the Mengs. Did I force you?" Lu Shi said, "We had 3 rules in advance, and you agreed to it willingly. Now you are accusing me and Gu Min of not treating you well. Why didn't you reject us back then? Meng Zhan is a scumbag, but you, Gu Zhen, are not a good person either. Be kind, especially when you are bullied by dogs. Learn to wag your tail, and you can live longer." Gu Zhen was so angry that she almost couldn't breathe. "Jiang? It is true that Ji likes to hurt people's feelings, but you have not lost your original heart. How could she hurt you?" Lu Shi said, "She has been providing for you all these years. Her treatment is no worse than providing for the world. She has been too good to you, and you have been too successful. Your cautiousness has been worn away, and your true nature has been exposed. Think about it calmly. If it was you in the past, would you behave like this? You wouldn't. If you were that kind of person, you wouldn't have coaxed Gu Min for more than 20 years. She didn't even see you clearly until she died. To put it bluntly, people are born in trouble, and they die in peace." Gu Zhen was too happy, and that was why her IQ dropped. It was the same logic as pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. "You really don't care about me?" Gu Zhen was regretful, but she refused to admit defeat. "Back in Chongzhou, you and Bai Dai mistakenly thought that I imprisoned you. Bai Dai blurted out that I killed Gu Min. Do you remember?" Gu Zhen's expression froze when she heard Lu Shi's abrupt mention of an old matter. "I remember, but I don't think you would kill her. Lu Shi had no reason to do so." "You're wrong. Gu Min wasn't killed by Lu Shi, but he was connected to the main system. From this point of view, Lu Shi was also the murderer." Lu Shi didn't explain. He purposely scared Gu Zhen and let her guess blindly. He could also get a few days of peace. He got up and strode out of the courtyard. He didn't care about Gu Zhen's emotional journey. In the afternoon of the next day, 2 rare guests came to visit. "My dear nephews, please sit." Because Gu Zhen was Lu Shi's second wife, Nie Sun and Meng Zhan avoided Lu Shi to avoid embarrassment and trouble. It was rare for them to come in person. The brothers didn't have any other intentions. They just said a few words, hoping that Lu Shi would take care of Gu Zhen and not let her suffer. Lu Shi raised his eyebrows. "That's it?" The word sounded nice, but in reality, there was no substance to it. Jiang? No matter how crazy Ji was, she wouldn't have instructed Lu Shi to abuse her second wife. As long as Gu Zhen didn't mind returning to a normal standard of living, her life was better than many noble ladies. If the 2 brothers came just to say these words, it could only be said that Gu Zhen really didn't know how to behave in the past. She had a good eye for cozying up to powerful people. She used to cozy up to Gu Min, then Lu Shi, and then Jiang Ji, but she couldn't control herself and offended all 3 of them at once. When she cozied up to powerful people, how would she think about getting her 2 sons? When she poisoned them, she didn't think that failure would implicate her sons. Now that she was in dire straits, her sons treated her out of respect. As long as Gu Zhen ate well, wore well, and lived well, the 2 brothers wouldn't care much. Meng Heng said, "I already know that mother poisoned the Lord. It was her fault. It's already a mercy that the Lord is willing to spare her life. I don't dare to ask for more. I only ask that she be safe for the rest of her life. I'll be relieved." Ask for Jiang Ji or Lu Shi released Gu Zhen. Meng Heng had never thought about it. He didn't have the cheek to ask for it. Nie Sun had the same idea. Chapter 1791. It looks like my 2 cousins have given up on Gu Zhen. When Meng Heng and Nie Sun got up and left, Lu Zhao showed up. Lu Shi said, "They are smart. Of course, you can also say that they have been completely disappointed by Gu Zhen." That was the reason, but Lu Zhao still sighed for Gu Zhen, who was imprisoned in the backyard. Not long ago, she was still in the limelight. Her food, clothing, and necessities were all luxurious and exquisite. The standard of the maid serving Gu Zhen was even comparable to that of the Empress Dowager. In other words, everyone treated her as the future Empress Dowager. They coaxed her, flattered her, and praised her to the skies. Jiang Ji's success was attributed to Gu Zhen's teaching. She had praised her so much that Gu Zhen had forgotten herself. Now, she was locked in the backyard. Everyone avoided her. Even her 2 sons had given up on her. Lu Shi rolled his eyes at his son. "If you have the time to worry about others, you should worry about yourself." No matter how bad Gu Zhen was, she had enjoyed so many years of wealth and prestige. Lu Zhao's life had just begun. Before he was completely safe, how could he have the time to sympathize with others? Lu Zhao said, "What's there to worry about, son? My sister and I don't compete with each other. We are counting on her to support us." As an idler, Lu Zhao was in a state of boredom every day. He wanted to find something to do. He reflected on himself 3 times a day to find out what he was good at. After thinking for a few days, he came to a conclusion: eating, drinking, playing, and having fun. Spending money to enjoy life was his talent. Fighting for a career was too far away for him. Others struggled bitterly for their entire lives, all for the sake of running to the finish line of the race. His sister was the organizer of the games. He could win by squatting at the finish line without doing anything. Why would he waste his energy? It sounded so reasonable that Lu Shi couldn't refute it. Lu Shi had the urge to have a stroke. "That's all you've got?" Lu Zhao retorted. "Others have a good life, but they can't even compare to me. With his current standard of living, others would have to struggle their whole lives to reach the position of the 3 ministers and 9 ministers. In terms of annual salary, Jiang Ji's subordinates could compete with Lu Zhao. The few important ministers under Ji Yunshu could compete with Lu Zhao, but in terms of per capita disposable income, none of them could fight. Those important ministers had to deal with people, support their families, and support their maids and servants. No matter how high their annual salaries were, they wouldn't have much left. Lu Zhao's food, clothing, accommodation, and transportation were all taken care of by his sister. He enjoyed the treatment of a government official, and the money allocated to him was all disposable pocket money. Lu Shi was speechless. He felt more and more despair for this son of his who was walking the wrong path. Logically speaking, Lu Zhao was already married. Ji should be controlling his pocket money and letting her sister-in-law take care of the accounts. Unfortunately, Lu Zhao was shameless and hugged Jiang Qianqian. Ji's thigh cried that his living standard had plummeted. Ji gave him more pocket money. Not to mention saying such shameless words to outsiders, just thinking about it in private was enough to make one flustered. Ginger? Ji let this brat do whatever he wanted and actually approved it. Lu Zhao became more and more excited. After he and Madame Cheng had a child, he was also Chao Jiang. Ji asked for an extra share of the money for the baby. The money I gave you before is not enough to raise a child. Jiang? At that time, Ji was fighting in Nansheng. When she saw Lu Zhao's letter, she picked up the pen and wrote such a sentence. Lu Zhao's answer was very straightforward. The child was indeed his child, but he was also Jiang, Ji Ye's nephew. He was Ji Ye's nephew. No matter what, he would not lower his standard of living for his child. In the end, Jiang Ji could only approve the money for the child's milk powder and diapers. It was rare for a father to be as unreliable as Lu Zhao. Although he was in despair, Lu Shi was also gratified that Lu Zhao could be so open-minded. Gu Zhen was just too greedy and was taught a lesson. Lu Zhao did not have to worry about food and drink for the rest of his life. Jiang Ji raised him and saved Lu Shi the trouble of being a father. To Jiang? To Ji, anything that could be solved with money was never a problem. It was not difficult to guarantee Lu Zhao a lifetime of glory and wealth. As long as Lu Zhao did not change his mind, she was willing to support him for the rest of his life. This was also her returning the favor and repaying Gu Min's kindness to her. Even though she had never met Gu Min, she had indeed enjoyed the benefits brought by Gu Min Jiang. Ji was very clear about kindness and hatred. She would take revenge for the evil that others had done to her and remember the kindness that others had shown her. Lu Shi poured cold water on his son indifferently. There are some things that you can't stay out of even if you don't want to fight for them. Lu Zhao could not help but perk up his ears. Seeing that Lu Shi had no intention of continuing, he could not help but humbly ask for advice. I am stupid and do not understand. Please enlighten me, father. As long as your sister does not have an heir, you will be in danger of being roasted on fire. Follow Jiang. The older Ji was, the more pressure she would have to bear children. To outsiders, if she did not have an heir, it was the safest to adopt her biological brother's child. Nephew and niece and Jiang. Part of Ji Ye's bloodline was the same. She could close her eyes and treat her as her own child. If that was the case, Lu Zhao would be in danger. No matter how thick-skinned I am, I can't persuade my sister to sleep with more men, can I? Lu Zhao could not help but grimace. He looked conflicted. If my sister was a man, or if the responsibility of childbirth was taken up by a man, I could also help her find a thin and plump man to send to her room. She could sleep with whoever she wanted, but that is impossible. In the end, whether she can give birth or not depends on her. This problem was too difficult for Fat Tiger. Lu Shi said, you might as well go all out and ask for it. Maybe you will get one. Lu Zhao was speechless. Father. Biological father. Are you being serious? Lu Zhao asked, what if she has an unmentionable disease and cannot give birth? Lu Shi rolled his eyes. Don't worry, she can give birth. The problem is when she is willing to give birth. If she could not give birth, how could the Empress generations that Gu Min mentioned continue? As the second female Empress of the Jiang dynasty, Jiang Yen carried on her mother's will and created a prosperous era. She also laid a good foundation for the continuation of the Jiang dynasty. If it were not for the efforts of the previous emperors, the Jiang dynasty would not have been able to retreat from the tide of reform. It was strange that the quality of the emperors of the other dynasties was different. There were wise emperors and useless ones. The emperors of the Jiang dynasty were all excellent and wise. Their average level was so high that it made people feel hopeless. According to Gu Min, among the emperors of the Jiang dynasty, only Empress Chen was criticized. The other emperors could not find any flaws. The most interesting phenomenon was that in many web novels that traveled through ancient times, the dynasties other than the Jiang dynasty were used to motivate people to struggle. Only the setting of the Jiang dynasty was used to talk about love. In the words of a few romance, Yuri, and romance gurus, they didn't dare to be sure that their heroine or male protagonist could surpass the Empress. Since they couldn't surpass the Empress, they would just prostitute the Empress. Smiley face angle, if she had the ability to make the Jiang dynasty a disaster area for many Fujoshi and Yuri, how could the founding emperor of the Jiang dynasty not give birth? If she did not give birth, the next few generations of female emperors would jump out of the stone. Lu Zhao said in despair, how would I know when my sister is willing to give birth? If I could, I would want to give birth to a son for her. Lu Shi glanced at his son. Now that he had grown up, he still wanted to go against human relations. To sum up, Jiang Yen was the one who was most distressed and anxious. The one who felt the most pain and anxiety was Lu Zhao. After all, this matter was related to his life. Jiang Yen was very busy these days. Ji had been very busy these days, so Lu Zhao hadn't had the chance to see her. He was sensible and would not disturb her at this time. After waiting and waiting, he finally found the right opportunity. On this day, the sun was shining brightly. Brother Rongli looks so good today. You look especially handsome. Chongqing was still wearing the blue and white school uniform of the Golden Scale Academy, while Feng Yi changed into the graduation uniform that only graduates were qualified to wear. The male students all wore the same uniform with narrow sleeves and round collars. The waist belt could outline the slender figure of the youth, making him look handsome and tall. Feng Yi usually dressed in a scholarly robe. Her face was on the frail side. She looked scholarly but not heroic. Today, she was different from her usual style. Chongqing's eyes lit up when she saw her. She walked around him a few times. It's getting late. We still have to go to the drill ground. It will be rude if we are late. Feng Yi hooked her fingers on Chongqing's palm to stop her from fiddling with the accessories on her waist. It was quite embarrassing. Chongqing said, Mr. Jiang is so nice. Today is Rong Li's big day. I was worried that I was not qualified to see him. She could not see the previous graduation assessment. She thought that she would not be able to attend the graduation ceremony. GFA said that all students of the Golden Scale Academy could attend. The other branch monasteries were far away, but each branch could still send a few dozen representatives to watch the ceremony. Just thinking about it made one realize how grand it would be. When Feng Yi heard the two words Lord Jiang, she almost couldn't react. Ginger? Ji Yunshu had changed her name. The usual Lord Lanting and Lord Lu were not very useful. Ji Yunshu did not explicitly say what her name was, so outsiders could only choose between Duke Ming and Duke Jiang. Duke Ming was quite normal, but Duke Jiang was a little strange. In The Investiture of the Gods, a novel written by a certain novelist, there was a character named Jiang Taigong. Since Jiang Ji Yunshu made it clear that she disliked the term Lord Jiang, so everyone changed it to Lord Jiang. After all, it meant the same thing. The scale of the Golden Scale Academy was not small. In addition to the representatives of the branches who came to watch the ceremony, there were more than 2,000 students in the entire drill ground. It was the same drill ground, the same group of people, but the mood of the spectators had changed. Wind? Looking down at the large group of students dressed in blue and white uniforms, he could faintly see the grand future. Lord Jiang sure is generous. Seeing so many students, did the aristocrats feel a sense of urgency? No matter how many people there were in an aristocratic family, the scale could not reach this level, not to mention the talented disciples. But these students were Jiang Taigong. Regardless of the quality alone was enough to make most of the aristocrats restless. It was probably impossible for the aristocrats to monopolize education and official careers like before. Feng Zhu tilted his head and looked at Jiang Taigong, who was sitting in the main seat in the distance. Ji Yunshu was lost in thought for a long time. However, Feng Jin felt honored. No matter how these students developed in the future, it would not affect the Feng family much. On the contrary, the Feng family would benefit a lot from it. At the end of the day, the Feng family's foundation was different from other aristocrats. Therefore, they could still talk and laugh and watch the wind and clouds. To cater to today's atmosphere, Jiang Taigong was also wearing a female graduation uniform. However, the patterns and decorations on the clothes were more complicated. She was also wearing a thin, rich, and big-sleeved shirt on the outside. In terms of style, this set of clothes was also of the same series as the students. Master Yuanjing took the lead, and a few big shots of the academy spoke one after another. They had been in the education industry for so many years, but they had never been as happy as they were now. Among them, Master Yuanjing was the most happy. This year, there were a total of 181 students who had successfully graduated. The rest of them did not perform well or did not have enough accumulation to graduate. The 3 students with the best results would be given by Jiang Taigong. Ji would personally award a special graduation token. According to the rules, the top 3 students' tokens would be made of silver, the 4th to the 50th would be made of bronze, and the students after that would be made of wood. This year's top scholar was not Feng Yi, who was the most popular. It was not even a male student as everyone thought, but a female student. Although they knew it on the day the results were released, the audience was still a little surprised to see the person in person. There was a clamor of discussion among the crowd. You did very well. You need to keep up the good work for the subsequent scholar selection assessment. Jiang Taigong? Ji personally handed the graduation token representing the top scholar to the hands of the top scholar. The top scholar said, "I will not disappoint Lord Jiang." The top scholar was a handsome young man. The bullet screen in the live broadcast room was full of, "Little brother, do you want a date?" The other party had never seen such a big scene, let alone Jiang Taigong. Ji was so nervous that his muscles were tense. Jiang? Ji also said encouraging words and handed the token to the top scholar. You seem to have something to say to me? Jiang? Ji saw that the top scholar wanted to say something but was hesitant, so she took the initiative to ask. The top scholar took the opportunity to ask her, "I heard that Lord Jiang was assassinated. Is he better now?" As soon as he finished speaking, the Confucian scholar's face turned cold and he scolded softly, "Do you know your crime of peeping on your precious body?" These words seemed to be reprimanding the top scholar, but in fact, he was protecting him. Rather than waiting for Jiang, Ji would rather let the Confucian scholar scold him first. Ji could not pursue the matter further. Jiang? Ji waved her hand to appease him, it's not a big deal. It's just that I'm concerned about me. My body is fine now. You can rest assured. The second half of the sentence was said to the top scholar. The top scholar shyly revealed a happy expression and retreated with his hands folded in front. Fengzhen and the others watched with strange expressions. They could not help but glance at Wei Ci from the corner of their eyes. Wei Ci was still smiling. They could not see anything wrong with him. What a joke. In his previous life, he had seen many students who were obsessed with their younger brothers and sisters. Jiang Taigong had no one else. Fengzhen privately joked that Wei Ci's smiling face was the smile of the first wife. As they spoke, it was the third flower's turn. Feng Ji, Zhangping, Xiaoguang and the others all congratulated Fengzhen because the third flower was Fengzhen's eldest son, Feng Yi. Fengzhen was so happy that he could only see his teeth, but a few jealous fellows could not help but mock him. He was not the top scholar or the top scholar. He was only the third flower. How could he be so arrogant? He was from an aristocratic family and was surpassed by two commoners. What was there to be happy about? On second thought, some of the children of this batch were also graduates. They did not even get into the top 10, so they felt even more unbalanced. You have the style of your father, but you cannot be arrogant. You still need to work hard in the future. Don't let down your ancestors' reputation. Jiang Ji was very familiar with Feng Yi, so she did not say much. She was more like a senior admonishing a junior. Feng Yi bowed and retreated. Ji also returned to the main seat. The following students were awarded graduation badges by Master Yuanjing and the others. The 4th to 7th students went up one by one. The 11th to 50th students were in groups of 2. The remaining students were in groups of 5. When all the students received their graduation tokens under the witness of the crowd, 2 hours had passed. After the ceremony, there were some entertainment activities. The atmosphere was not as solemn as before. Lu Zhao finally found a chance to talk to Jiang. Ji was alone. Sister, there's something I want to ask. Chapter 1792. Jiang? Ji raised her eyebrows. Looking at Lu Zhao's desperate expression, she suddenly had the urge to not listen to him. Sister, it's a matter of life and death. Lu Zhao reached out and grabbed Jiang, who was about to leave. Ji once again sighed at the plastic sibling relationship, but she said pitifully, I'm begging you for a moment. Listen to my complaints. Jiang? Ji suppressed the urge to roll her eyes or burst her veins. Lu Zhao didn't have anything good to say to her. He was either crying about being poor or weak. His pitiful look made it seem like someone was bullying him. Looking at the entire Wanzhou, even Dongqing, Beizhou, and Nansheng, who would dare to cause trouble for Lu Zhao? What was the use of crying about being weak? Speak. Ji stopped and raised her hand to signal for the attendants to leave. Then she said to Lu Zhao, there's only you and me here. Can we talk? Lu Zhao was terrified. He stammered for a long time without saying anything. Jiang was furious. Ji retorted. If you're a man, be straightforward. Aren't you afraid of getting sick after holding it in for so long? Lu Zhao was speechless. Sister, I know you like to talk dirty, but you should be more pure between siblings. Don't be so dirty. I'll say it, but you have to promise that you won't hit me. He pitifully asked for a promise. No matter what, he had to get the death exemption medallion first. Jiang? Ji said, don't worry, I won't hit you. If Lu Zhao really said something he shouldn't and angered Jiang? Ji, then what was the point of hitting him? She could just beat him to death. Lu Zhao asked her vaguely, Sister, are you unwell? If she really couldn't give birth because of her body, then she shouldn't hide her illness for fear of treatment. She could secretly consult a gynecologist. Jiang Ji didn't understand. She thought Lu Xiao was worried about her injury from the assassination last time. Her expression softened a little. The injury last time wasn't deep. It'll heal after a few days of rest. It's not a big deal. Lu Xiao was so anxious that his forehead was sweating. Who told her about this? He was asking if she could give birth. He wasn't suited for curveballs, so he could only go straight to the point. Sister, I'm asking if there's anything wrong with your body. Did those years of military life stop you from having children? Ji's face turned from sunny to cloudy, faintly showing signs of thunder and lightning. He was so frightened that he hurriedly said, Sister, I didn't mean to offend you. I really can't live on like this anymore. If you don't give this little brother a precious nephew or niece, this little brother will be forced to death. Ginger? Instead of getting angry, Ji Buki laughed and said, Who did you say wanted to kill you? Lu Xiao looked at his finger and said carefully, Those people can only be understood, but not explained. I don't want to be a villain who sows discord. A few days ago, I asked Father, and he said that your body is fine. However, your body is fine, and you haven't had any children for many years. This really makes me a little flustered. I have specifically asked an experienced midwife and doctor. The older a woman is, for example, after 30, the greater the risk of giving birth. I'm still counting on you to take care of my family. If anything happens to you, my family will fall apart. Ginger? Ji Buki's face darkened. What do you mean? Lu Xiao put away his pitiful expression and said seriously, Sister will be 30 in a few years, and it's time to take the test to have children. Let's not talk about the fact that having a child can dispel many evil thoughts, it's also good for your body. When you get older, you won't have as much energy as you do now, and it'll be more difficult for you to have a child. If you have one at this age, it'll be easier for you in the future. Ginger? Ji Buki said meaningfully, It's so troublesome to have children on your own. It's better to adopt one from you. You won't be stingy with a child, right? This short sentence was like a bolt from the blue to Lu Xiao's ears, exploding his scalp. He was so frightened that he knelt on the ground and grabbed Ginger. Ji Buki's skirt was sobbing, and she looked frightened and pitiful. Lu Xiao got into character so quickly. She really wondered if he had specially studied acting all these years. Sister, I dare to sell my son for glory. Madam will be the first to kill her husband to prove her Tao. Do you think I'm scaring you or testing you? Lu Xiao shook his head. A dragon will give birth to a dragon, a phoenix will give birth to a phoenix, and a mouse's son will dig a hole. Your nephew took after his father, and my future children will most likely take after me. It's fine if the age difference between the two children is a little big. If the age difference isn't too big, the boy will most likely be beaten to a pulp. He should learn from me to eat, drink and enjoy himself. Such difficult and life-threatening work is really not suitable for him. Lu Xiao didn't doubt Ginger. Ji's words were true, but he was more worried about the future situation. What if Ginger? Ji didn't intend to have children. It was also good to adopt someone else. Would he throw the child to Ginger? Ji educated him. But Ginger? If Ji had her own child, then the adopted son would be a whetstone. When the knife was sharpened, it would be kicked away. Of course, the child could also kill and sharpen the knife. But was that possible? Look at Ginger. Ji knew how fierce her future child would be. The child raised by a woman with such a character, unless he was congenitally retarded, would not be of a low level. Lu Xiao was self-aware. Although Lu Shi always mocked Lu Xiao for pretending to be a pig to eat the tiger, there was nothing wrong with his brain. It was just that he was possessed by a drama queen. Jiang? Ji was speechless. Lu Xiao really had the strongest desire to live she had ever seen. I recently had this idea, Lu Xiao had already put it this way. Jiang Ji might as well reveal something to help Lu Xiao save his dignity. What idea? Lu Xiao blinked blankly. He couldn't react for a while. When he understood, he couldn't help but let out a cry. Ji frowned and immediately stopped talking. She tried hard to lower her voice and said, "Sister, are you saying that you have plans to get one?" Jiang? Ji's expression was indifferent. It was as if this matter was as common as eating a meal. She couldn't understand the excitement of others. "Yes, I want one." She had never mentioned this idea to Wei Ci. The first person she revealed it to was Lu Xiao. Lu Xiao also understood the underlying meaning. He said with a strange expression, "From what you mean, you've been deliberately using contraception?" No wonder there was no movement even though he was strong. Feng Jin and the others didn't seem to have any reaction, but they were actually worried sick about this matter. "What else?" Jiang? Ji asked in return. "Even you came to me to urge me. If I don't consider it, how long do I have to delay it?" She naturally had this idea not because Lu Xiao came to her to urge her, nor was it a sudden impulse. After several days of careful consideration, she finally decided to have one. Wei Ci quarreled with her that day. Although they didn't get angry, Jiang Ji still seriously reflected on herself. She didn't want to have children. Her original intention was to make the time of pregnancy as close as possible to the time that Wei Ci knew. She wanted to give him hope and make him believe that this child was the Jiang Yan he owed a lot to. If there was a chance to have another Wei Tsong in the future, she would at least fulfill his wish. However, after that quarrel, Jiang Ji found that doing this would only evoke Wei Ci's memories of his previous life. It would make him recall the failure and pain of that life over and over again. Why was this necessary? Since he was reborn, he was different. Why was he still clinging to the various things of his previous life? She and Wei Ci would still have new children. Perhaps they would still be called Jiang Yan or Wei Kong. After all, these two names were quite nice. It would be a pity to give them up. However, the two children would definitely not repeat the ending of their previous life. Anyway, they were different. Why not change it more thoroughly? For an ordinary woman, having a child might be a matter of course, but for Jiang Chen, having a child was not a big deal. But Jiang Ji tossed and turned and struggled for a long time. The world regarded women's childbearing as normal, but she came from an era where natural childbearing was zero. To her, childbearing was more terrifying than a great flood or a ferocious beast. "When I go back, I must buy 8 or 10 artificial incubators." The old chief poured a bucket of cold water on her. "You Abba, forgive me for being blunt. The price of an artificial incubator is 10 times your annual salary plus bonus. How much savings do you have? Can you even afford 8 or 10 of them? This kind of equipment is a strategic resource of the Federation. Private ownership requires strict approval. Think about it." Jiang Ji. It was really annoying to pour cold water on her at a time like this. Jiang Ji had something on her mind. She ate absent-mindedly that day at the celebration banquet. When she returned at night, she was even greeted by Wei Ci. "Lord, are you feeling uneasy?" When Wei Ci heard Feng Ju, that brat, say Jiang Ji was distracted 7 times during the banquet. Her jealousy kept bubbling up. Ever since the Lord changed her name, the number of times Feng Ju came to the government office had skyrocketed, as if he had a second spring. If not for the fact that one of the parties involved was Jiang Ji. Wei Ci really wanted to write an anonymous letter to Feng Ju's wife and ask her to teach Feng Ju a lesson. Jiang Ji did not speak. She just hugged Wei Ci. The two of them hugged and rolled on the floor. As they rolled, their clothes were almost gone. Wei Ci still had the sense to touch the raincoat under his pillow. He had used it many times and was familiar with it. In the end, looking at the raincoat that was accurately thrown into the brazier by the Lord, Wei Ci was at a loss for a long time. The procedure was wrong. Shouldn't throwing the brazier be done after? It was done before. Jiang? Ji said, that thing is in the way. She did not wait for Wei Ci to react. By the time he reacted, what should be done and what should not be done had already been done. Where are we going? Jiang? Ji Zhuo hugged Wei Ci's shoulder. The two of them were at the age where they were full of energy. They fooled around for a long time. It was the middle of the night. Where was he going if he was not in bed? Wei Ci said in annoyance, I didn't pay attention just now. I'm going to get some medicine for the Lord to make contraceptive soup. There were no hidden dangers in using the raincoat as a contraceptive, but drinking the soup was different. Even the contraceptive soup with the least side effects would be harmful. Every medicine was 30% poisonous. Jiang? Ji turned over and said, keep it. Wei Ci maintained his posture of sitting up for a long time. It was as if a string in his mind had snapped. Keep it? Lie down and sleep. I'm cold. Jiang? Ji's voice was lazy and hoarse. It was the kind of voice that made one's legs go weak. Wei Ci nodded blankly. His movements were so stiff that he lay back on the bed. His arms and legs were stretched out as straight as a log. He stared at the beam of the roof until his eyes were sore. Only then did he regain his train of thought. Lord, the Lord said to keep it? Didn't this mean that the young Lord was coming? Jiang? When Ji was in a daze, she felt Wei Ci's palm hovering over her lower abdomen. She wanted to touch it but didn't dare to. She flipped over and retreated a little further towards Wei Ci. It was the same for the next few days. Jiang? Ji was the same as usual. Her work efficiency did not decrease but increased. Wei Ci was like a scholar who had his yang energy sucked dry by a demoness. He was dispirited. Feng Lingzi was still teasing him. The Lord is not even 30 yet. Why are you like a wolf and a tiger? Look at Wei Ci. He had been sucked dry. He didn't dare to say this in front of Jiang. But Wei Ci was thin-skinned. It was fun to bully him. Wei Ci said, what nonsense are you talking about? I've been worrying about other things recently. I can't eat or sleep well. Looking at the things piled up on his hands, Wei Ci pushed them all to Fengzhen. Why me? I haven't been feeling well these few days. I'm afraid I've made mistakes in government affairs. Wei Ci said, you and I are close friends. Do you still need to say such a small thing? Fengzhen was speechless. Wei Ci said again, the Lord is precious. He needs to be in awe at all times. Your joking words just now have crossed the line. If he told the Lord, Feng Lingzi would probably be skinned alive. Wei Ci used both the carrot and the stick. He moved Feng Lingzi and threatened him. Feng Lingzi gave in. While Fengzhen was fighting with government affairs, Wei Ci found a cushion and a table. He leaned against it and took a nap for the whole afternoon. Careless in making friends. Careless in making friends. Wei Ci slept soundly. Fengzhen could only grit his teeth as he watched. Jiang? Ji knew what Wei Ci was worried about. She smiled and said, it's not the first time. Are you still not used to it? Wei Ci said, this has nothing to do with the first time. As long as it was this person in front of him, he couldn't feel at ease. Jiang? Ji said, it's useless for you to be anxious now. You won't be able to tell in a few months. She was in good health. She was in a state of vigorous qi and blood all year round. She could often feel her slippery pulse, but it wasn't the pulse of pregnancy. Even if she had a child now, she probably wasn't sure if she was pregnant. That was the case for outsiders, but Jiang Ji's mental strength was extremely strong. She could immediately know if there was a foreign object or another life form in her body. She didn't need to feel her pulse at all. Wei Ci was speechless. Actually, even if the Lord was 6 or 7 months pregnant, he might not be able to tell. Smiley face angle, when a normal woman was pregnant, she would most likely be bloated and have a big belly. But Her Majesty was different in his previous life. Her belly would only become bigger in the last 3 months. Before that, it was no different from not being pregnant. So when Her Majesty used the excuse of feeling pregnant, the world miraculously accepted this setting. Because in their eyes, Her Majesty's pregnancy was really only 3 or 4 months smiley face angle, so, is she pregnant or not? Jiang Ji smiled like a flower and asked, why don't you guess? Wei Ci was speechless. He couldn't guess. Oh, Jiang? Ji acted like nothing had happened. She ate, drank, and slept as she should. Wei Ci, on the other hand, had become thinner these days. When outsiders asked, Wei Ci used preparing for the scholar selection examination as an excuse. In the end, he won praise and said that he was respectful. But Feng Zhu found some clues. These days, Lord Jiang seems to be very concerned about the battle reports from Zhongzhou. Jiang Ji said, the situation in Zhongzhou is related to Wenjing and Zidao's many plans. Seeing that Zhongzhou is about to lose and is about to fall into our hands, wouldn't it hurt if someone jumped out and took this piece of meat away? Naturally, I have to keep an eye on it to prevent any changes. Feng Zhu's senses were sharp. He faintly felt that Jiang Ji was still hiding something. Chapter 1793. After all, Feng Zhu was not a roundworm in Jiang Pengji's stomach. How could he know everything? Not to mention Feng Zhu, even Wei Ci, who slept beside her, could not guess what Jiang Pengji was sincerely hiding. Normally, that would be the case, but there were always accidents. Jiang Pengji's secret could not be hidden from anyone. This person was not a bystander, but the old chief who knew Jiang Pengji's schemes very well. Your dad, Jiang Pengji was eating breakfast. Recently, her taste had changed. She would not be happy without spicy food. All the chilies in the kitchen were eaten by her. Breakfast should be light and nutritious, but who dared to say no when Jiang Pengji was willful? Under her strong request, the meat porridge and steamed bun for breakfast were also added with chili powder, and it was a super spicy chili. The onlookers felt their tongues hurt when they looked at her, but Jiang Pengji acted as if nothing had happened. She finished the bowl of porridge in a few mouthfuls. Not only did he like spicy food, but his appetite had also increased. In the past, 1 bowl of porridge was enough to fill one's stomach. Now, he had to eat 2 big bowls for breakfast, basins as big as wash basins, and 10 steamed buns. If breakfast was already like this, then lunch and dinner should be even bigger. Roughly speaking, it should be 50% bigger than before. Sans Hisongshu snacking, is the host's stomach connected to a 2-dimensional black hole? Mala tripe, is that the point? Wasn't the main point that the host didn't gain any weight despite eating and drinking so much? I'm so jealous. They were born in an ancient gourmet country with 8 major cuisines, yet they had bodies that would grow fat just by drinking water. That kind of pain was something they couldn't tell others about. Looking at Jiang Pengji's appetite, which had remained the same for more than a decade, their jealousy was about to overflow from their screens. Even though Jiang Pengji was eating a dark dish of mushroom and beef porridge sprinkled with chili powder, the salted fish were hungry just by looking at it. At this time, another eye-catching golden bullet screen flew across the screen. This was the exclusive privilege of the unique Almighty in the live broadcast room. Don't want to lose weight, wow. It was the first time I saw a big shot say something. The old chief was the only person that the salted fishes knew who could deal with Jiang Pengji. He was the boss of the bosses, or simply known as the big boss. Lai Pingren show, grab the big boss's tail for a photo. Those who want a photo, line up. Foodie who eats delicacies, huh? Why did boss send 2 messages? Was there any meaning to it? Fusheng Yueshao, I seem to be able to see through the 3 question marks in the boss's mind. Jiang Pengji gulped down the last of the porridge. She picked up a folded handkerchief and wiped her mouth. She patted her flat belly and burped. Satisfied, Jiang Pengji sighed and looked up to see the third, floating in the middle of the screen. Old chief, your account was hacked? 3 question marks in a row didn't seem to be her style. It seemed more like a random message from a little brat who had stolen her account. You're Abba, you're the one who's been hacked. With a tick, a private message was sent. The old chief did not want 5 million people to watch the conversation between him and Jiang Pengji, so he chose to chat privately. Jiang Pengji said, if your account wasn't hacked, why didn't you say anything and only sent question marks? There was silence on the old commander's side for a long time. You're Abba, don't play dumb. I don't believe you didn't notice the changes in your body. In their era, the standard for determining death was from brain death to spirit dissipation. In other words, as long as the spirit did not dissipate, there was still a possibility of recovery. Under such circumstances, people paid more attention to their mental state. The old chief did not believe that Jiang Pengji did not notice. What did she notice? She noticed that there was a weak, small, and unfamiliar spiritual fluctuation in her spiritual world. Yes, there was no mistake. A single strand. The old chief realized that Jiang Pengji did not remove it. Instead, she showed a protective stance. That was thought-provoking. Even if he had not seen a pig run, he had eaten pork. The old chief immediately thought that it was a natural pregnancy. In other words, Jiang Pengji was pregnant. The commander of the Federal Army knowingly broke the law. Jiang Pengji rested her chin on her hand and said, you noticed? That's right. I can't hide this from you. Just like how Jiang Pengji could tell that Jiang Nongqin was pregnant with a glance, the old chief could also determine whether Jiang Pengji was pregnant based on her mental state. Your Abba, why so sudden? I've been planning for the past few years. I'm only free this year. There are too many people urging me to get married. I want to give them a surprise. Your Abba, are you sure this isn't a shock? This is the young lord they've been looking forward to for a long time. Isn't the shock followed by ecstasy? I don't want them to rush to me one by one. Jiang Pengji yawned. Although pregnancy did not put much of a burden on her, she still felt sleepy and weak from time to time. Your Abba, what do the others say? Jiang Pengji said, I won't let them know for now. It'll save us a lot of trouble and prevent people with ulterior motives from deliberately plotting against us. The longer the pregnancy, the more opportunities there were for people to plot against her. Jiang Pengji did not want to waste her energy dealing with those demons and monsters. Perhaps her state of mind had changed. Jiang Pengji also planned to pave the way for the child in her womb. No, it might not be a child. When the time is right, I'll announce it to the public. When would the time be right? Wait. She and the old chief's conversation was in a private channel. No one knew what they talked about except for the two of them. After that day, Jiang Pengji's appetite and taste changed again. She ate more, and her taste became darker. Somehow, word of her appetite got out and became a topic of conversation among the common people. Wanzhou was a place where plump was considered beautiful. The people thought that Jiang Pengji ate hard because she wanted to gain weight, but she just could not gain weight. These rumors are too outrageous. Who spread them? Jiang Pengji was indignant. Her appetite was normal, and she did not shed tears because she was thin. The guy who spread the rumors came out to be beaten. Wei Ci said, "The governance of the manor is strict. No one dares to spread rumors, but does my lord still remember having a meal with Feng Ju, the third son of the Feng family, at Zhika House? No matter how strict the management of Zhika House is, it's still a public place. There are many people coming and going. There must be people who saw my lord eat a little too much." Jiang Pengji, Feng Ju, and Huang Song were the only ones in the private room, but the three of them ate like 30 people. With a little inquiry, they knew whose stomach most of the food went to. Jiang Pengji became famous with one meal. Just as Yang Tao once complained, Jiang Pengji conquered the world mostly because of her appetite. If she did not conquer the world, she would not be able to support herself. When this matter reached the ears of the people, there were countless speculations. It was normal to speculate that Jiang Pengji ate a lot to gain weight. Some people even said that she was the reincarnation of Tao Tai. She ate a lot and was cruel. Of course, there were also people who said that Jiang Pengji practiced divine skills and that she consumed a lot of energy to fly in the sky and travel underground. It was because the food in the mortal world did not have enough spiritual energy. Although she had eaten the food of 20 strong men, the spiritual energy she had absorbed was barely enough for her to be 80% full. Some people said that Jiang Pengji was not actually alone. She had thousands of doppelgangers, so her appetite was huge. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Had the people of Wanzhou been brainwashed by the novelists under Wei Ci? Weren't they afraid that their wild imagination could not be stopped? It was impossible to stop it. Without imagination, life would be as boring as stagnant water. Fortunately, as the end of May approached, the people no longer focused on Jiang Pengji's appetite. Their attention was attracted by other gossips. Not only was the examination the liveliest event in the history of Wanzhou, but it was also a large-scale face-slapping scene. How many gentry swore that they did not want to participate in the examination and compete with gentry. At the end of the face-slapping, they said, "How delicious." It was impossible not to participate in the examination. It would never be possible, because Jiang Pengji, the shameless woman, had banned the recommendation, abolished filial piety, and inspection. Of course, it was not right to say that it was abolished. The official reason was that after the examination, there would be sufficient manpower for the time being. The places in each place would be given priority to the gentry who passed the examination. Only then would they live up to their trust and hard work. Jiang Pengji would give it a try first. If the gentry who passed the examination was not good enough, she would replace them with people who were qualified to inspect the examination or those who were filial piety. If the gentry who passed the examination was not enough, people who entered officialdom through other means could replace them. Jiang Pengji did not make it clear, but looking at the students of the Golden Scale Academy, a batch of leaks would mature in 1 or 2 years. No, a batch of students would graduate. If they were given priority every year, would the other gentry who did not belong to the academy stand out? In other words, if they did not participate in the examination, they would not have the chance to become an official. In the past, they could join some families as advisors or serve as incompetent military advisors in the local government, using it as a stepping stone to climb up, but now this path was cut off. When Jiang Pengji announced the news, some gentry who had a keen sense immediately realized that something was wrong. Even if they were humiliated, they had to participate in the examination. If they missed this opportunity, they did not know if they would have another chance in the future. With similar thoughts, many gentry who were from the side branches secretly asked their servants to sign up for them. However, it was the first examination. The publicity was not strong and the impact was not deeply rooted in people's hearts. Not many people signed up for the examination. Including the first batch of graduates of the Golden Scale Academy, there were only about 1,000 gentry who signed up for the examination. This was incomparable to the million gentry who signed up for the national examination in the salted fish dimension. Jiang Pengji had a list of vacant positions in the government offices of various prefectures, counties, and towns. Even if the 1,000 gentry were accepted, there would still be a lot of vacancies. Of course, Jiang Pengji did not plan to accept all of them. Some important positions would be filled first. She would let the various offices operate first and enter a virtuous cycle. When the next batch of leaks. No, when the students graduate, the situation would get better. Because of her health, Jiang Pengji did not personally preside over the examination. Other than the court examination, which she attended, the officials took care of the rest. Perhaps it was because Jiang Pengji often did not do anything, but no one suspected the deeper meaning behind her laziness. Moreover, Jiang Pengji did not preside over the examination, but she did a lot of things. The characters of these gentry should also be assessed. Those with good characters and honest temperaments can be sent far away to train. Those who are disobedient can be placed nearby. Their positions don't have to be too high. Let's suppress their arrogance. Jiang Pengji said casually, but it made things difficult for others. Fengzhen asked, how do we assess their character? It was hard to know what was in a man's heart. If one met someone with good acting skills, even a devil could be packaged as a flourishing white lotus. Jiang Pengji said, don't the records of the graduates of the Golden Scale Academy remain? Check. If this batch of students is of good standard and can pass the examination, then they should be sent far away to train for 3 to 4 years. When the time comes, we can transfer them to a higher position. That way, I can be more at ease. Fengzhen was surprised. According to the rules of officialdom, a position close to the political center. Even a small official was a level higher than a high official in a remote and desolate place. She probably did not understand. Simply put, those who were far away were not valued. Those who were placed nearby were the ones who were in the emperor's heart. How could the mayor of the capital and the mayor of a local area be of the same rank? Fengzhen thought that Jiang Pengji had misunderstood and was about to explain. Jiang Pengji said, do you know what the mountains are high and the emperor is far away means? If people with imperfections in character or fierce temperaments are placed in places that I cannot control, they will deceive their superiors and the people will suffer in the end. Although this batch of students from the Golden Scale Academy is a little naive, they all have a drive in them. They often dare to do things that old foxes do not dare to do. This kind of person is also the best at seeking the welfare of the people. By sending them far away, not only can we use difficulties to hone their abilities, but we can also make them do good things for the people. Her way of thinking was different from others, but she always had her reasons. With that said, Fengzhen understood. Stubborn diseases need strong medicine. My lord's painstaking efforts. I hope they can understand. Jiang Pengji said, I will guide them. There was always a reason why those places were backward and barren. Perhaps it was a natural disaster, or a man-made disaster, or perhaps it was the collusion of local tyrants and local officials. For example, in some small places on the salted fish dimension, people from a small village with dozens of households would fight to be the village chief. They would show off their official authority, but in private, they would embezzle the tens of millions of assets from the village's immigration plan. In ancient times when information was not developed, there were many examples of such corruption. This phenomenon was the stubborn disease that Fengzhen spoke of. The students from the Golden Scale Academy were a strong medicine. Even if one dose could not eradicate the disease, it could more or less improve the focus of the disease. Has Wenjing sent any battle reports today? Jiang Pengji had been paying special attention to the situation in Zhongzhou recently. She would ask if there was any new news almost every day. Yes. When Feng Zhen saw the orange panda emblem stamped on the envelope, he was shocked. Previously, the battle reports sent from Zhongzhou were all green emblems, which meant that they were daily news, nothing major. According to the weight of the battle reports, the emblems stamped on the envelope were green, yellow, orange, crimson, and pure black. Although the orange emblem was not at the level of using fast horses for transportation, it also meant that the situation in Zhongzhou had changed. They needed to be vigilant. Jiang Pengji opened the battle report and read it carefully, then put it away and burned it. When the next battle report arrives, send it here immediately. Feng Zhen was anxious. The situation in Zhongzhou has changed? Jiang Pengji smiled and said, there has been a change, but it's a good thing. As for how big a good thing it is, I'm not sure yet. You Abba, why are you hiding it? Of course it's to build momentum. What else? There are no coincidences in this world, only painstaking planning. You should understand this principle, old chief. You Abba, build momentum? Jiang Pengji said, for the little enemy in my belly. Chapter 1794. The old chief would not be surprised if he heard it from someone else, but it was different when it was Jiang Pengji who said it. How could she not know Jiang Pengji's temperament? Although I can't see your expression right now, I can guess that you must be very surprised, right? Although he was asking a question, his words were full of certainty. Jiang Pengji understood him as much as the old chief knew Jiang Pengji. You Abba, I am indeed a little surprised. You don't look like someone who would do such unnecessary things. In the eyes of the idle audience, it was human nature for parents to plan for their children. It was a parent's duty. However, this judgment was not very useful in Jiang Pengji's era. The Federation did a survey. More than 73% of the people were unmarried and infertile. They would rather spend their time and energy on work, creating value, enjoying life, and accompanying their lovers. Very few people would like to raise a child and teach a baby who was like a blank piece of paper to learn about the world bit by bit. Firstly, many young people felt that they were not capable of playing the role of a good parent and could not be responsible for the other's life. Secondly, the Federation had a perfect system and organization. The quality and efficiency of teaching children were better than that of young parents. Thirdly, with the rapid development of economic civilization, young people were under great pressure to survive. Even if they were to take care of their own children, they would let the family robots take care of them. Since the introduction of the artificial incubation chamber, this trend slowly became mainstream. In the past, there were people who doubted that education without parental involvement would not produce outstanding children. Children who lacked love would have psychological defects. However, when it was put into practice, the effect was very good. Many parents had their own flaws, such as personality defects, moral defects, and violent tendencies. They taught these to their children, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Even if they subconsciously restrained themselves, humans were not perfect. It was impossible to be vigilant and restrained at all times. The family babysitting robots did not have these flaws. They always showed perfection to their children. No matter how mischievous the children were, they could teach them over and over again. They would not gradually lose patience like ordinary parents and show negative emotions to their children. Children who caused trouble could not avoid due punishment by acting coquettishly or crying. Except for a few special cases where they were born with genetic defects and could not empathize with ordinary people, most children's education was better and more efficient than ordinary parents. This kind of education had its pros and cons. The pros were obvious, but the cons were also quite obvious. Taking Jiang Pengji as an example, she resonated with the identities of the commander of the army and the lord. She knew how to love her subordinates, how to weigh the pros and cons, and how to deal with and manage the situation. This was because these were instilled in her from a young age. As a warrior, she would not abandon her comrades. As a commander, she would look at the bigger picture and do her best to protect her soldiers. As a lord, she would not disappoint everyone's hopes. However, no one had taught her how to play the role of a parent. Jiang Pengji had naturally longed for her own parents, but she had never thought that she would become another child's parent. If they didn't have this concept, they naturally wouldn't adjust their character's positioning. Instead, they would choose a character they were familiar with. For example, a lord and his subordinates, or a king and his subjects. The former dominated the latter, and that was the role of giving orders. Jiang Pengji only needed to tell them what was the right thing to do. If they encountered any difficulties, she would let them solve it themselves instead of guiding them from the side. If Jiang Pengji was at the old chief's age, she would probably use the senior and junior template. But she was not that old yet. Jiang Pengji was unfamiliar with the role of a parent. She could only explore it by herself. The old chief thought that he was going to give her some pointers, but he didn't expect Jiang Pengji to wake up first. It was impossible to expect Jiang Pengji to be enlightened by herself. There were most likely hidden secrets that others didn't know. No matter what, Jiang Pengji's change was a good thing. I didn't want to make these unnecessary arrangements, but... Jiang Pengji recalled Wei Si's previous life, and her chest was filled with irritation for no reason. But this world is different from ours. The children here are too weak. They are so weak that they can be taken away with a minor illness. Unlike the newborns in the Federation, each of them is equipped with a home care robot. Even their parents can't hurt them. Once a child came out of the artificial nursery chamber, the child's genes would be bound to a home care robot. From birth to 10 years old, the robot's protection level for the child was the highest. From 10 to 15 years old, the protection level would gradually decrease. After 18 years old, the protection level would be completely separated from the home care robot. During the protection period, even the parents could not harm the child with any malicious intent. In this era, it was impossible for a child to be beaten, scolded, or to be strangled or drowned in the toilet just because it was a girl. That was because the home care robot was equipped with a combat mode. The combat mode was created by collecting the physical and combat data of thousands of martial artists. Even Jiang Pengji, who was at her peak in her previous life, could not subdue the robot without using her ultimate skill. Not to mention ordinary people. Once the robot's protection mechanism was triggered, the lightest punishment would be to be rubbed against the ground. The most serious punishment would be having their joints dislocated. They would be prosecuted and deprived of custody and custody rights. Their reputation would be blacklisted and they would not be able to enjoy the various benefits provided by the Federation. There was also a lame joke on the internet. A netizen ranked the combat power of each family member. An 8-year-old son could not defeat his wife, and his wife could not defeat him. He could not defeat his 8-month-old daughter, and the 8-month-old daughter could not defeat her 8-day-old brother-in-law _ smiley face angle _. The younger the child, the higher the combat power of the bound home care robot, and the looser the restrictions on the use of force. This was normal for Jiang Pengji, so in her mind, babies should be the safest. But in this era, there were no home care robots. Babies were the weakest. In troubled times, they would be used as food by cruel murderers. Even the barbarians in the south wrote a cannibal rhapsody. It was a voluminous 400 to 500 words. Each word was stained with blood. They proudly said that baby's flesh was the most tender. If such people were in Jiang Pengji's era, they would have been killed on the spot by the home care robot and smashed into minced meat. Jiang Pengji was indignant before. She wanted to kill as many of such people as possible. Now that she had become a mother, her violent emotions were particularly strong. Because she could not imagine that the tender flesh that was widely discussed in the Cannibal Rhapsody would come from her own flesh and blood. Realizing this, Jiang Pengji would naturally learn to play the role of a home care robot and give the children the protection they deserved. Chapter 1795. Jiang Ji said it in a domineering manner. The old general was so quiet that he seemed to have disconnected. After a long while, he slowly climbed up. Your Abba, although I don't want to disturb you from showing off your domineering aura, I have something to report to you. Jiang? Ji raised her eyebrows and asked, what is it? Your Abba, you may not be able to give birth to a normal child. I can't tell you the details. You mean this? Jiang? Ji said, I had a hunch. It's not normal for two embryo sacs to only have one spiritual fluctuation. The two embryo sacs should be twins, but there was only one spiritual fluctuation. This meant that only one embryo sac was normal. It would make sense if one of the embryo sacs didn't grow, but it was strange if the two embryo sacs were growing at the same speed. Jiang? Ji thought of the inside story that the old general had revealed earlier. She was already mentally prepared. According to the old general, Jiang? Ji would definitely return to the Federation to continue being the commander of the army. She might even take over the position of the old marshal. She was so important that she couldn't spend her entire life in this time and space. This plane was so important, but the Federation still needed to borrow Jiang? Ji had accumulated the luck from this era to survive the disaster. Then, she needed someone to take over and maintain the dynasty, so that the luck could continue to flourish and even improve. After thinking about it, Jiang? Ji felt that the old general was the most likely candidate. This was because she had only met one old acquaintance so far. The old general's ability also fit the criteria. Of course, this was only her guess. When she found out that the embryo sacs were abnormal, she was even more certain. The body prepared for the old general couldn't have an owner. That was because seizing someone's body was a capital offense in the Federation. If the old general really wanted to take over the mess, he could only use a body that had no soul. It's good that it's you. After all, you're someone I know. If it's someone I don't know, I'll complain to the Federation. This world was far away from the Federation. Although it was a little backward, ambitious people could do well here. Jiang? Ji didn't want someone who knew her for a long time to ruin her hard work. Even if it was a small farm, she had worked hard for many years to get it. This time, it was the old general's turn to be silent. Your Abba, you really don't mind? You're not going to ask me why I did it? Ginger? Ji Yunshu waved her hand. I trust the old man's ability. He's definitely more reliable than a nanny robot. His daughter and the old general were twin sisters, and he could even make the old general call his mother obediently. Just thinking about it made him feel so comfortable that he wanted to moan. Most importantly, with the old chief joining them, the problem of the children's education would be solved. The only thing that bothered him was that the body that the old leader wanted to use was Ginger. It was very strange that it was produced by G. I was wondering why my appetite had grown so much recently, and my appetite had even increased explosively. So it's all because of you. Your Abba, she was not going to take the blame for this. By the way, when are you coming online? Your Abba, after you give birth, I don't want to experience the feeling of coming out of the birth canal. Ginger? Ji Yi's face darkened. MMP. You make it sound like she's reluctant. No, Ginger. Ji Yunshu suddenly thought of something. If the old general came online with a new body, who would buy things for her in the future? Who knew how long the Federation would let her stay in this world? At the very least, they would have to wait until the old chief's body reached adulthood and he could take charge on his own. If that was the case, it would be at least 18 years. What was the concept of 18 years? Ginger? Ji Yunshu couldn't help but plan for her own blissful sexual life. In the future, we will not only be superiors and subordinates, but also mother and daughter. Then I'll be straightforward. Where are you now, old general? The old general asked her gently what she wanted. Ginger? Ji Yunshu said, if this is the ancient era when technology was just budding, help me buy a few hundred boxes of that. I need to stock up. The old general, Ginger? Ji Yunshu asked again, do you know the gender of the new body? The old general? Whether it's a man or a woman, you have to be responsible for yourself and your partner. It's very painful to give birth frequently, so you should buy more. I'll help you stock up. I don't know how long you'll be staying here, but it's definitely more than 18 years. It's better to be prepared. Ginger? Ji Yunshu's words were meant to tease the old general. Everyone in the 7th Division knew that the old general smoked, drank, fought, and had tattoos on his arms. However, he was an old-fashioned and serious old cadre. If she came to this era, she probably wouldn't learn from Ginger. Ji Yunshu was a dog of pride. She thought that she would be greeted with a thunderous roar from the old general, but he only replied with 5 words. Your Abba, thank you for the reminder. Ginger? Ji Yunshu? Excuse me. System notification, your friend, your Abba, has gone offline. He must have gone somewhere to do wholesale. Could it be that I've misjudged him? This guy is wearing the skin of an old cadre, but his heart is exceptionally frivolous? As she muttered, Ginger? Ji Yunshu suddenly felt waves of heat coming from her waist. It was so hot that she almost unsheathed the god-slaying saber. She looked down and realized that the source of the heat was actually the saber at her waist. She raised her hand to touch the hilt of the saber and pulled it out. She realized that the usually white and shiny blade was slightly pink. Ginger? Gee, a lot of dirty 18x content suddenly floated in her mind, such as human saber play and whatnot. I remember that the old general once called the virtual spiritual being in this saber, Zai. Could it be that it's not a child but, mortals would never understand the taste of a big shot. Speaking of which, if Zixiao calls me daddy during that time. Ginger? Ji Yunshu's imagination ran wild. He'll probably break down. To achieve this achievement, who knew how many years of teaching would be needed to take this step smiley face angle Ginger? Ji Yunshu could only put away this thought. The grandeur of the scholar selection examination was far grander than the graduation examination of the Golden Scale Academy. Scholars gathered in Wanzhou. Many scholars from other villages came because of its reputation, but when they stepped into Xiangyang district, they felt the embarrassment of farmers entering the city. Everywhere they looked was novel, but at the same time, they felt a sense of rejection that was out of place. Many scholars heard about how prosperous Xiangyang was when they came for the examination. But no matter how they imagined it, they always felt that the so-called prosperity was only a little more majestic and lively than the county they were in. Only when they saw it with their own eyes did they understand what it meant to be a frog in a well. Because of this, they made a lot of jokes. Wanzhou, which already had a strong learning environment, held elegant poetry gatherings everywhere. Scholars from various families were invited to exchange ideas, exchange what they needed, and at the same time, get to know each other. Many scholars from other villages thought that they could come and look down on the country bumpkins, but they didn't expect to be watched by scholars who had lived here for a long time. A certain scholar mentioned a certain unique book, saying that this unique book was a book collection of some aristocratic family and they wouldn't lend it to outsiders easily. He used a lot of connections to borrow it to read, and it was very precious. He thought that he would attract the envy and flattery of his acquaintances, but in the end, many people looked at him as if he was an idiot. After asking carefully, he found out that the Golden Scale Pavilion had a complete set of books that anyone could read. Chapter 1796. The Duke of Lanting is too despicable. Such arguments were occasionally heard in the tea-houses and taverns, but the crowd did not argue with them. They thought it was a few hotheads who wanted to use such methods to become officials. It was not like there was no such example in the past. In ancient times, a scholar criticized a certain monarch in the market. The monarch did not kill the scholar for the sake of his reputation. Instead, he tied the scholar up and sent him to the monarch. The monarch asked the scholar why he criticized him. The scholar spoke with fervor and assurance. Every incident touched the monarch's heart and pointed out the hidden dangers that the monarch was most worried about. With a series of actions that were as fierce as a tiger, the scholar caught the monarch's attention. From then on, he stepped on the clouds and was promoted all the way. The monarch earned the reputation of being a kind and generous beau. The scholar also earned the reputation of being an intelligent and resourceful horse. The story of the monarch and the minister was passed down as a legend by the later generations. With the example of their predecessors, many latecomers wanted to imitate them. However, they did not imitate them and instead became sensationalists. Moreover, there were many ways to become officials now. The scholars from poor families did not need to use such a suicidal method to gain fame. The imperial examinations were around the corner. Those who wanted to use such a method to gain fame were either stupid or stupid. Talented people were not afraid of the imperial examinations. Those who should be on the list would still be on the list. Without talent, even if they gained fame, they would only be a joke to others. How is the Duke of Lanting hateful? His friend tugged at the scholar's sleeve and corrected him. Everyone knows that she has changed her name and cut all ties with the Liu family. Now, she is using the Jiang surname bestowed upon her by the heavens. You should respectfully call her Lady Jiang. If he used the old title once or twice, it could be said that he was not used to it. However, if he still used it after the correction, it would mean that he was dissatisfied with Jiang Pengji. How precious are books! That scholar was indignant and had a pained look on his face. His friend was puzzled and echoed, "They are indeed precious." The scholar continued, "Such precious books are naturally only suitable for scholars to possess. Those peasants from all walks of life should not covet them. The Duke of Lanting does not know this. Instead, he made so many books in the Jinling Pavilion public. All kinds of filthy and smelly things can come and dirty the scent of ink for no reason. His family had quite a collection of books. Although he didn't think that his collection could compare to a noble family like the Feng family, it was more than enough to beat up a poor family. In his hometown, there were many scholars from poor families who flattered him in a roundabout way. They did not even hesitate to send their own sisters, and daughters to please him, just to borrow his family's books for a few days. He had been proud of this for many years and looked down on those who came from a poor family. No foundation was no foundation. Where was the arrogance of a scholar's character in his bowing and scraping manner? However, this sense of superiority was smashed to smithereens when he arrived in Wanzhou. He had seen many scholars from humble backgrounds spend several years in the Golden Scale Pavilion, following the lectures of the great Confucian scholars nearby. Their knowledge and experience were more than 3 streets behind him. Yesterday at the assembly, he had been ridiculed by 2 disciples from a poor family for being a frog in a well, and they had called him a country bumpkin from the countryside. He had always been the one looking down at others from above. Since when did others have the right to mock and ridicule him? The disparity was too great. He was unable to accept it. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. After going around in circles, he felt that everything was Jiang Pengji's fault. Books were owned by the aristocratic families. The poor could only bow and scrape to have the right to peep into the sea of knowledge. The commoners should be ignorant for life. This kind of extreme thinking lingered in his mind like a messy cluster of thorns, growing and spreading in his heart. Originally, he was confident that Toad Palace would win, but after coming to Wanzhou and seeing so many unscientific poor families, he suddenly felt a pain in the ass. If the poor were like this, how could those aristocratic families who had a long foundation be? The atmosphere of the imperial examinations was not proper. Asking him to take the exam with the poor was an insult to him. It was fine if he did not take the exam. He was not the only one who held this kind of thinking. The temple is small, but the wind is strong. The pond is shallow, and there are many turtles. Changsheng listened and frowned. Her eyes were filled with disdain for these people. He doesn't have much ability. He doesn't reflect on himself and instead picks on others. How can he be so arrogant? Pfft, it's just a funny joke. Why does Changsheng care so much? In the private room, Wan Xiu and Changsheng sat opposite each other. The room they were in was not far from the table outside, so they could hear it quite clearly. Changsheng said, "I feel indignant for brother Rongli. He actually has to compete with such a despicable person." Wan Xiu laughed. They speak so bluntly. They may not be qualified to participate in the imperial examinations. If this kind of person is allowed to climb up, the commoners will suffer. Little did they know that the two of them were not the only ones who heard this. Jiang Pengji, who was in the private room next door, also heard this. She came out purely to relax. She wanted to see the commoners' lives, but she didn't expect to hear such harsh words. It's better to eliminate this kind of idiot from the beginning. Letting him enter the written exam is a waste of my paper and ink. Most of Jiang Pengji's subordinates were poor, but there were also many aristocratic families. The two groups got along quite well, and there were no sharp conflicts for the time being. Who knew what kind of chemical reaction would happen if such an idiot was allowed to enter? She walked back and asked Wei Ci to send people to investigate. She found that there were many idiots like this. I thought this kind of idiot was one of a kind. I didn't expect them to be assembly line products made from a mold. Jiang Pengji yawned and said sleepily, "Eliminate them by manipulating in the dark. If their character and morals are not good, they can't be used no matter how talented they are." Feng Zhen and the others agreed on the surface, but they were secretly pleased. It was fine if they didn't use their brains, but they actually fell into Jiang Pengji's hands. They really didn't know how to spell the word death. After all, this kind of idiot was in the minority. The first imperial examinations were held as scheduled. In order to uphold the principle of fairness and to promote the imperial examinations at the same time, other than the written exam, all the other events were open to the public. Of course, not everyone could come and watch this open event. I heard that Lord Jiang once attended the graduation assessment of the Golden Scale Academy's students. Why is there no sign of him in the imperial examinations? Could it be that they look down on the scholars? Someone else said, "Wasn't Lord Jiang assassinated that time?" There are many scholars in the imperial examinations. There are crooks mixed in with the honest folks. They have to consider Lord Jiang's safety. With this explanation, many people felt much more at ease. Someone else said, "I heard that there will be a big change in the next imperial examinations. We haven't even finished this year's examinations and you're already thinking about the next one?" Of course I'm thinking about it. If there's no next imperial examinations, how can we scholars from humble backgrounds become officials and serve the emperor? All kinds of rumors spread among the scholars. Time passed day by day. After 3 rounds of screening, only 50 people entered the court examinations. The rankings of the other scholars were out. Among the 50 people in the court examinations, more than 70% of them were scholars from the Golden Scale Academy. The students with the worst results were within the top 500. When the statistics were out, many people who were pessimistic were slapped hard in the face until their faces were swollen. Chapter 1797. On the day of the court examinations, Jiang Ji received a battle report from Zhongzhao. The insignia on the report was black. Jiang Ji Yunshu opened the letter and carefully read every word 3 times. Wen Zheng has never disappointed me, she didn't burn the letter. Instead, she put it in her sleeve. She would need it later to build momentum. Since Jiang Ji decided to have a child, she wrote a letter to Qiguan Rang at the border, asking him to take over half of Zhongzhou in the shortest time possible. Taking over half of Zhongzhou was not difficult, but Jiang Ji set a time limit for this task. Zhongzhou was in a mess because of Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen. There were no less than 20 independent feudal lords. The internal strife was more serious than in Dongqing. Nie Qing was in dire straits and had long lost control of the situation. The Nie family's assets were also taken by the side branches. The elders of the other branches also jumped out to stir up trouble. In a short year or two, the situation had evolved into the present. Jiang Ji couldn't swallow all of Zhongzhou in one go, but it wasn't difficult to divide the cake into a dozen pieces and slowly nibble it away. Qiguan Rang had this idea. He took advantage of Nie Qing's weakness and took advantage of the fact that the Nie family had little control over Zhongzhou to split them and stir up conflict among the various factions. At first, they could still control it. But later on, they were in a frenzy. Who cared about the country? Even if they wanted to control themselves, they couldn't stop Qiguan Rang and Old Man Sun from sending people to fan the flames. Jiang When Ji's letter reached Qiguan Rang, he had already decided to close the net after the autumn harvest. He had been afraid that Beiyuan and Xichang would take the opportunity to catch the cicada. In the end, he sent people to investigate and found that the situation in these two countries was even more exciting than he had imagined. Without this layer of worry, even if Jiang Ji didn't say anything, Qiguan Rang also wanted to petition for troops. But sending troops was one thing, timing was very important. A few months earlier and a few months later could result in a world of difference. Qiguan Rang didn't understand why Jiang Ji was in such a hurry to start the war. But he was loyal to Jiang. As long as the other party's orders weren't outrageous and reasonable, he wouldn't question them. Qiguan Rang held the letter and discussed with Sun Wen through the night, thinking about the possibility of taking over half of Zhongzhou within the stipulated time. Old Master Sun said solemnly, "Why don't we write a letter to the Lord and ask for forgiveness for a month?" It was not impossible to take down half of the Zhongzhou in such a short period of time, but it would be risky. They still had ample military supplies, so they could take the risk. It would be good if they could gain a firm foothold, but if they couldn't, I'm afraid our army wouldn't have the strength to attack this year. The punitive expedition against Zhongzhou has to be postponed to next year's autumn harvest. My lord shouldn't be aware of this. Although Old Man Sun was not a stickler to the rules and often used tricks on the battlefield, when it came to the big picture, he preferred to fight steadily and surely. Zhongzhou was already in the bag. They could drag it out until the autumn harvest before sending troops to attack. Zhongzhou had been burdened by frequent wars in the past few years. In the past 2 years, there had been full-scale wars. Their crops could not keep up with their consumption. Starting the war in autumn was when the enemy was at their most ferocious. All the feudal vassals were short of food, so why would they go all out to fight for food? If Qiguan Rang and the others sent out their troops at this time, they could fight while dragging the battle on. They would definitely win. If they sent out their troops now, they had to take some risks. Qiguan Rang understood this as well, but he knew Jiang Qin better. Ji needed this victory. Even if the other party didn't say what they needed this victory for, as a subject, he had to achieve it for the other party. Qiguan Rang's attitude was firm, and Old Man Sun compromised. The two of them planned for several days and finally found a breakthrough. Old Man Sun watched Qiguan Rang not sleep for several nights and had an absurd thought. Could it be that Qiguan Rang had feelings for his lord that surpassed that of a ruler and subject? Old Man Sun asked in private, but Qiguan Rang flatly denied it. "I don't. Don't talk nonsense. It's impossible." Old Man Sun was speechless. Old Man Sun was experienced and knowledgeable. He didn't believe that there was such a pure friendship between a man and a woman. The facts proved that there was. Jiang? Wasn't Ji and Qiguan Rang enough? Or should he say, Jiang? Other than Ji and Wei Ci, the feelings of all men were so pure. Smiley face angle, they didn't treat Jiang Qin as a woman at all. Ji Dexiang was a woman, and he was a straight man, so he was naturally a close friend. Qiguan Rang hadn't slept much for a few days, but he was even more energetic. He was high as if he was on steroids. "I have a feeling that something good will happen if we take over half of Zhongzhou." His lord didn't fight a battle unprepared. She suddenly asked Qiguan Rang to send troops to Zhongzhou. There must be a reason. Sun Wen was speechless. Old Man Sun felt that taking over half of Zhongzhou was a great thing. What could be better than this? Beiyuan and Xichang surrender to them? Unifying the 5 countries in minutes? After guessing for half the night, Old Man Sun yawned and went to catch up on his sleep. He left the tactical arrangements and mobilization of troops to Qiguan Rang. "I'm old, I don't have much energy." Old Man Sun stretched his back and looked in the direction of Zhongzhou, deep in thought. He had dreamed of his homeland countless times and had thought of 10,000 ways to take revenge on the enemy. When this goal was about to be achieved, the old man didn't feel the joy he had imagined. Instead, he felt empty. It wasn't the emptiness of being disappointed, but the emptiness after feeling refreshed. Smiley face angle, under the careful planning, the civil and military officials cooperated well. The chess pieces that had been planted were put to use one by one. Zhongzhou was like a domino that had collapsed. They looked strong, but when they encountered an enemy that was closing in on them, not only did they fail to defend their position, but they were also completely annihilated. In just 21 days, of the 33 counties in Zhongzhou, 4 prefectures and 16 counties fell. A few days before conquering the 4th prefecture, Qiguan Rang sent a messenger to Jiangxiang. Ji Yunshu used the highest grade black emblem to send the battle report. Half of the Zhongzhou had fallen into his hands, and the first palace examination had entered its final phase. This palace examination would be called the Fight of the Immortals in later generations. More than half of the scholars were the cornerstones of the 2nd generation after the founding of the Jiang dynasty. They played the role of connecting the preceding and the following and creating a prosperous era. At the same time, this court examination created a record that would never be seen again. The same person was hit 4 times in a row. In later generations, the highest score in the imperial examinations was 3 yuan in a row, but this year, there was someone who passed 4 yuan in a row. In the end, the top scorer was still the girl from the Golden Scale Academy. The last question was domineering and intimidating. Feng Yi, one of the favorites to win the championship, was also suppressed by her. That was why she did not lose, but she lost in terms of momentum. In the end, Ji Yunshu named the girl as the top scorer. In the previous few rounds, this person's score had always dominated the first place. In addition to the top scorer in the graduation examination of the Golden Scale Academy, she was jokingly called the only one to pass 4 yuan in a row. Feng Yi was not the third flower this time. He had risen to the position of the second rank. The original second rank did not perform well and was ranked 6th. To be able to obtain so many talents in this imperial examination is the greatest blessing in life. According to the procedure, after a few words, it was time to go home and find their mothers, wash up, sleep, and prepare for the Qianglin banquet the next day. Chapter 1798. The 5 countries will unite and Ziwei will descend from the heavens. These words reverberated in everyone's hearts and did not subside for a long time. Congratulations to the Lord for obtaining a talent. Congratulations to the Lord for obtaining Zhongzhao. Congratulations to the Lord for having a successor. An older official stepped out. He was so excited that his hands were trembling and his eyes were filled with tears. People of his age had suffered the most. The chaotic world had tortured them for too long. He had thought that he would never see peace again. He never expected to hear such good news. The 5 countries will unite and Ziwei will descend from the heavens. The heavens are finally taking pity on the people. Jiang Ji said, all of you are pillars of the country. With all of you here, why worry that prosperity will not come? The heavens have listened to your wishes and have sent the incarnation of Ziwei into my womb. Half of Zhongzhao is in our hands. Xichang and Beiyuan are obsessed with internal strife and wasting the country's power. There is nothing to fear. Half of the 5 countries were in her hands. The rest were weak and unbeatable. If not her, who would unite the country in the future? Even the heavens had recognized her and had specially sent the incarnation of Ziwei into her womb to create an even more prosperous dynasty. In this way, who would be able to compete with her? Those who did not know the truth were fooled by her words and believed in everything she said. If it was not the will of the heavens, how could everything be so coincidental? Zhongzhao had always held strong. Before this, there was no such news. There was not even a rumor of war. They only heard that the feudal lords of Zhongzhao were enraged. The troops stationed at Zhanjiang Pass did not move and did not intervene in the internal struggles of Zhongzhao. Without any warning, on the day of the court examinations top 3, news of a great victory came from the front lines. The most mysterious thing was that the unmarried lord, who had been quiet and had a clean private life, was suddenly pregnant. It was discovered that the day before she was pregnant, she dreamed of a dragon and phoenix in her womb. One by one, it was not a big deal. But when 3 good things happened on the same day, it was not as simple as 1 + 1 + 1 is equal to 3. Did they not see that everyone was so happy they forgot their manners? Did they not see that the older officials were crying on the spot? Jiang Ji was still not pregnant. How many people were worried about her? Now, the heavens couldn't stand it anymore and sent a purple star. What did this prove? This proved that the Lord they followed was the Son of Heaven. The next emperor would also be a wise ruler. The prosperity and peace would last for at least 100 years. Those who had not experienced the tumultuous times would never be able to understand that kind of suffering and their longing for peace. Now, they no longer needed to look for plum blossoms to quench their thirst. Peace and prosperity were waiting for them at their fingertips. Everyone bowed and congratulated him, and their voices were resounding to the point it shot into the ceiling of the hall and wished for nothing more than to charge into the clouds. He was still saying, Lord, but in his heart, he was calling, His Majesty. She was the Son of Heaven. Even though she had yet to ascend to the throne, she was already a supreme ruler in everyone's hearts. In comparison, the reactions of a few insiders were more thought-provoking. Fengzhen secretly winked at Wei Xi, asking him when he got pregnant. He wanted to know if Wei Xi was cuckolded. According to his estimation, his lord and Wei Xi had been together for a long time. She was only pregnant now. This timing was very sensitive. Ask Wuxia. He was also a hen. Ginger? Ji announced the last piece of news in front of everyone. Wuxia's confusion and shock were no less than the others. He was also kept in the dark, but Wuxia didn't feel the slightest bit sad. Thinking of Ji's attention to the situation in Zhongzhou, Wuxia knew that today's result was something she had planned for a long time. It was to build momentum for herself and the child in her womb at the same time. With such painstaking efforts, what right did Wuxia have to be unreasonable and complain about her concealment? He wasn't the slightest bit dissatisfied, only full of excitement and tenderness. Wuxia could finally fulfill the vow he made when he was reborn, to accompany her and watch her ascend to the throne of supremacy. He also knew that this child couldn't be Jiang Yan. Jiang? Ji had always thought that Wuxia would mind this and was worried that he would be stuck in the quagmire of the past. She didn't know that Wuxia wasn't that fragile. He deeply loved the pair of children from his previous life and was filled with guilt towards them. Even in his dreams, he thought about how to make up for what he owed them. However, this life was different from his previous life. If he was obsessed with his previous life, how unfair would he be to his lord and future children? In Wuxia's heart, Jiang Yan would forever be his eldest daughter, and Wei Tsong would forever be his son. The newborn child would be the third. He or she was unique, not someone's substitute or shadow. Jiang? Ji seemed to feel something. Her resolute eyes swept over him and immediately softened. What happened in the main hall today spread at an incredible speed. Some officials who scrupulously abided by their duties and didn't attend the court examination were so shocked that their jaws dropped. Wanzhou was in a state of celebration. Is what you said true? Bai Wuxia, who had just given birth, grabbed the maid's wrist with all her might, almost scaring her precious baby into tears. The maid endured the pain, but the joy on her face came from the bottom of her heart. First Lady, it's true, it's really true. Bai Wuxia lifted the blanket and hurriedly said, "Quickly wash me up and put on makeup. I'm going to congratulate my lord." The maid and the wet nurse were shocked and hurriedly pulled Bai Wuxia back to prevent her from running out and catching a cold. Women had to go into confinement after giving birth. If they didn't take good care of her, she would suffer from confinement sickness. She would suffer when she got older. Bai Wuxia didn't believe this. She was in good health now. If Zhang Ping hadn't stopped her and her father had written a letter to her asking her to pay attention to her confinement recovery, she wouldn't have obediently stayed in bed. The weather was too stuffy now. Bai Wuxia hadn't left the house since giving birth. She hadn't washed her hair or taken a bath. Her bed was smelly. Most of the confinement has passed. My body has long since recovered. Don't worry about it. Bai Wuxia's heart was as hard as iron. She didn't listen to advice at all. She did things in a hurry and couldn't be stopped. Quickly prepare hot water. I want to wash up. I can't let my lord smell something strange. How could she not go and congratulate her on such a joyous occasion? She hadn't noticed it before, but now she felt that everything smelled bad. Her hair was itchy, and her pajamas had turned into yellow dried vegetables. The maids and old women couldn't stop her. Zhang Ping, the only person who had some authority, wasn't here, so they could only do as she said with bitter faces. When Zhang Ping stepped through the door, Bai Wuxia's foot bumped into him. Zhang Ping was speechless. Did the news spread so fast? Not only did Bai Wuxia know about it, but the commander of the troops stationed outside Xiangyang district also knew about it. Jiang Nongqin confirmed with the messenger 3 times in a row before she dared to believe the good news she heard. The 5 countries will unite, and the heavens will send Ziwei, Jiang Nongqin murmured several times. As she spoke, her eyes were filled with tears. She was so lucky to have the opportunity to see her lord rule the world in her lifetime. Jiang? Jiang Nongqin had followed her since she was still a noble scholar in Hejian County. She was the one who pulled Jiang Nongqin out of the swamp of despair and taught her how to create her own life step by step. She hadn't reached the pinnacle yet, but the joy of the 3 joyous events was no less than that of reaching the pinnacle. Chapter 1799. This is what it means to have the outcome set in stone. Huang Song sat on the porch and watched his son and daughter study. With his beloved wife by his side, he could be considered a winner in life. The warm family time was ruined by Jiang Ji's news broke. Huang Song was stunned for a while, and then a relieved smile appeared on his face. He raised his hand to rub his youngest daughter's hair and murmured, "Time really flies. Madam, in another 10 years, our generation will be old, and the world will belong to the next generation of young people." Qi Chaolan raised her hand to cover Huang Song's hand and playfully played with his fingers. It's been more than 10 years. There's still a long way to go. Are you admitting to being old already? Huang Song said, "You have to admit that you're getting old. The iron tree that hasn't blossomed or borne fruit for 10,000 years is now bearing fruit. With such a mother and such a prestigious background, your future is destined to be extraordinary. I, your husband, would like to see time pass a little faster and see what young people are capable of." Follow Jiang Ji's footsteps to unify the world were nearing, and Huang Song and the others were slowly withdrawing from the stage. Hearing the loneliness in her husband's voice, Qi Chaolan couldn't help but stroke his shoulder to comfort him. "Lang Jun, don't blame me for that." If Qi Chaolan had not used herself and their child to persuade Huang Song to stay, Huang Song would probably have committed suicide in that battle. To him, dying before he was defeated was not necessarily a bad thing. If that was the case, they wouldn't have to remember that they were losers for years and years. The winner would walk further and further away from them. If Huang Song did not live well, Qi Chaolan would also feel guilty. Huang Song said, "What nonsense are you spouting? How could your husband be so narrow-minded? In the beginning, it was indeed inconvenient. For example, when he went to the Golden Scale Academy to pick up his wife and children, he was stopped by the gatekeeper. If he was still a duke, who would dare to stop him?" However, after so many years, Huang Song had gotten used to it and thought things through. Everyone had their own ambitions. Staying with his wife and children might not necessarily lead a blissful life. Ascending to the 9 heavens might not necessarily lead a smooth journey. It was lonely at the top. Once a person's position changed, changes would follow. He only hoped that his young friend could still maintain his original intentions after he became a 9-5, and that everything around him would not change with the change of his identity. If he really wanted to talk about guilt, "Your husband feels a little guilty towards Madam," Huang Song said abruptly, causing Qi Chaolan to look at him in confusion. He smiled. Back then, Meng Zhan wanted to adopt a girl from the same clan as his daughter and give her to me as a concubine. "Madam, do you remember what you said?" Qi Chaolan had an awkward expression. She covered her sleeves and smiled. "It's been so many years. How can I still remember?" Huang Song said, "Madam has forgotten, but your husband still remembers." At that time, Qi Chaolan had threatened Huang Song with a dagger. If Huang Song dared to take a concubine, she would dare to divorce him and keep a handsome man. At that time, Qi Chaolan's aura had soared to 2.8 meters. Huang Song was so scared that he almost knelt down. "What you, Huang Bogeo, can do, I, Qi Chaolan, can't. Lu Shi was able to become a marquis as a woman, and I have 3,000 elites under my command. Can't I do the same and start from scratch? When the time comes, when I become a feudal lord, why can't I have 3 husbands and 4 attendants? Huang Bogeo, I have the support of my maternal brothers, and I have a famous master. I have learned the art of war from my father since I was a child. If it were not for the limitation of being a woman, I would have joined the army by now. Do you really think that I am a housewife who guards her own backyard? Do you think I can or can't do it? Every word was vivid in her ears. Now that she thought about it, it was indeed Huang Song who had held her back. She had the ability, but she did not have the opportunity to see the wider world. She was confined to the backyard to guard her own backyard. Marrying him was probably the worst decision Chi Chaolan had ever made in her life. However, Huang Song was still grateful that Chi Chaolan had caught a glimpse of him back then. From then on, she fell in love with him and insisted on marrying him. Speaking of which, Huang Song asked Chi Chaolan, "Madam, do you think your husband is as handsome as before?" Chi Chaolan raised her eyebrows and asked, "What do you think, Lang Jun?" His face was twice the size of a young man, and his double chin was showing. Thinking about how Huang Song was already in his 30s, it was common for middle-aged men to put on weight. Chi Chaolan did not despise him. Huang Song took a deep breath. His belly had yet to shrink, and he suddenly felt depressed. He still did not believe the words of those famous men. What did they say about being plump and fat being beautiful? It was all nonsense. I'm already middle-aged, and I still have to worry about whether my old face will be despised by my old wife. Sigh, Huang Song made up his mind to lose weight, and invited his friend, Feng Ju, to join a middle-aged fitness group. Feng Ju rejected him. He was as handsome as before, and the older he got, the more charming he became. Did he still need to lose weight? Huang Song clutched his wounded little heart and left. Feng Ju looked at the deserted courtyard, and his eyes flashed a little absent-mindedly. For some reason, while the people outside were celebrating and walking the streets to share their joy, he felt an indescribable loneliness. Madame Feng Ju said gently, "Lang Jun, why are you standing in the corridor? The sky is getting dark, and the courtyard is very humid. I'm thinking about something, but I can't figure it out no matter how hard I try." Madame said, "Then leave it for tomorrow to think about." Feng Ju asked her, "What if you can't figure it out tomorrow, and never in the future?" Madame said, "Then don't think about it. It's destined that you won't be able to figure it out. Why waste time? Isn't it better to cherish the moment?" These words made Feng Ju feel enlightened, as if the fog in front of him had completely dissipated. Yes, Madame is still the most thorough. Madame? When the news came, Lu Shi and Lu Zhao were drinking tea in the corridor. Those attending the court examination that day were all important officials. Lu Shi and Lu Zhao, one retired, and the other was a commoner. Neither of them could be present. Lu Zhao heaved a sigh of relief. "Sister finally has a child. Our son is safe." Lu Shi took a sip of tea and said, "Safe? Not necessarily." Lu Zhao was almost choked to death by his own father. What? How could it still be dangerous? Why was it so difficult for him to keep his life? Lu Shi looked at the splendid scene in the courtyard. His dark eyes seemed to be shrouded in a thick fog, and no one could see through his heart. The only person who could do it was long gone. Lu Shi said abruptly. "The wind is about to blow. The weather is about to change." "The weather is about to change?" Lu Zhao looked at the sky and said in surprise, "The sky is quite normal, and there was no mention of strong wind, heavy rain, or fog tonight." As he murmured, he suddenly stopped. The wind, the weather, was it the sky above their heads, or, father? Lu Zhao suddenly put down the teacup. The sound of it clattering was particularly clear at this moment. Lu Shi got up from the mat and said faintly, "No matter who wins or loses, don't get involved. When gods fight, they don't care about family." Lu Zhao's chest was beating violently, and an ominous premonition spread throughout his body. "Father, are you going to deal with sister?" Lu Zhao clenched his fists. Lu Shi suddenly laughed out loud. Why would I? I'm just like you, watching the fight between the gods. Chapter 1800. Father, you have to remind my sister. Lu Zhao looked into Lu Shi's deep eyes and stammered. His voice gradually trailed off. No matter how slow he was, he knew he had said something he shouldn't have, not to mention that Lu Zhao wasn't stupid at all. Lu Shi's deep eyes fell on his son and he asked him in a relaxed tone, as if he was asking about the weather. Remind what? Remind, that my sister might be in danger. After all, she's been very kind to us all these years. Before he could finish his sentence, Lu Zhao noticed that his father's eyes had become particularly scary, giving him an unusual amount of pressure. Lu Zhao didn't expect his father to have such a dangerous side. On second thought, if Lu Shi was really an ordinary scholar, he wouldn't have been able to suppress the local bullies in Hu County, let alone become famous in Dongqing. Lu Shi was still ruthless, but he had been cultivating himself and had been hiding it well. People gradually forgot that he used to be a ruthless person that everyone was afraid of. In the face of such a strong pressure, Lu Zhao's eyes revealed an indescribable complexity. Being neutral can still benefit from both sides, but once you choose a side, it'll be fine if you win, but it'll be beyond redemption if you lose. Lu Shi withdrew his aura and returned to normal, as if his earlier aura was just a hallucination. Won't my sister blame me? Lu Shi thought of Jiang Ji. Ji sneered, she knows what she's doing. The system was a gloomy guy, planning before taking action. Other than being stupid when it was sliced, it was still very good at other things. Even if Lu Shi hated the system to death, he knew that the system was cunning and wouldn't fail so easily. As long as it didn't kill the system, it would always come back and its revenge would be even more ruthless than before. Jiang Ji wasn't afraid of the system, but not the people she cared about. When Wei Xi was possessed by the system and committed suicide, didn't he almost die? Now, not only was there Wei Xi, but there was also an unborn child. The baby was even more fragile than Wei Xi. But Ji had to protect them. The worst decision your sister has ever made is probably to get pregnant at this time. The more weaknesses she has, the easier it is for the enemy to deal with her. Lu Shi sighed. Once Wei Xi or the child falls into the enemy's hands. What do you think she'll do? Maybe she shouldn't have tried to harm Wei Xi in the first place and let the system know her weakness. Lu Zhao was speechless. Father, it seems like you were the one who asked your son to hasten his growth. Now, he was criticizing her for getting pregnant too quickly and at the wrong time. This was too double standard. Lu Shi sneered. Do you think she made up her mind to have a child because of you? He has already made his decision. It has nothing to do with you. What was this kid thinking? Did he really think he was Jiang? Ji is very influential. Lu Zhao, he was probably her biological father. But Lu Shi changed the topic. It's hard to say if this isn't her plan to lure the snake out of its hole. It was just a simple sentence, but Lu Zhao felt a chill run down his spine. To lure a snake out of its hole, there must be a bait to attract the snake. If it was really intentional, then wasn't she using her weakness as bait? Lu Shi sneered and said, "You're not hopelessly stupid. She did treat you well, but no matter how good she is still a bad woman." Did they not see Gu Zhen in the backyard? Gu Zhen had stepped on her bottom line. She destroyed her feelings and tore apart the facade of warmth that had existed for many years without a second word. In the eyes of outsiders, she did not treat Gu Zhen badly at all, and it was indeed so. She was a filial daughter all these years. She's too nice. She's so nice that Gu Zhen has forgotten her identity and hers. She really thought there was a mother-daughter relationship between the two of them. Had Gu Zhen never thought about the consequences of failure? She had thought about it, but she was too confident that nothing bad would happen to her even if she was caught. Even if her deeds were exposed, she would still be the future Empress Dowager. Ji wouldn't really deal with her. Based on this foundation, Gu Zhen had the courage to take risks time and time again. In the end, Jiang Xiang was Ji had set up a counterattack. Lu Shi said, "Remember, she is Jiang. Ji was not Lu Shi. She can treat you like a younger brother, but there is no real brotherly love between you." From this point of view, Lu Shi and Jiang Qingho were in the same boat. Ji was the same kind of person. No matter how loving and filial the two of them were, outsiders were moved by their atmosphere, but their minds were still clear, and they were not corrupted by the so-called feelings. Gu Min was the only person in Lu Shi's life who had been bewitched and willingly fallen for it. Lu Shi understood Jiang. With Ji's personality, he would remind his stupid son, his mind was clear, and he would always remember this iron rule. Lu Shi smiled evilly. "Do you believe that if you can be the bait to lure the snake out of its hole, she will push you out?" Lu Zhao was speechless. Of course she would. But, sister is not a cold-hearted person. If she did this, she would definitely have a thorough plan. She wouldn't really let the bait enter the snake's stomach. Lu Shi sighed. Of course. Otherwise, wouldn't she be the one who lost? It was understandable rationally, but it was unacceptable emotionally. This was the situation. Regardless of who Jiang was? Who was the bait that Ji had pushed out? When the bait found out the truth, it would be hard to accept. Lu Zhao said, "Maybe, we're thinking too much." Lu Shi snorted and didn't answer. Thinking too much? No, he would only think that he was thinking too little. Jiang? Ji had fought with the system so many times and even had the upper hand. He should have known that this woman was not a good person. Lu Shi didn't believe that there was no consideration of luring the snake out of its hole during this pregnancy. Let's wait and see. Once they have a winner, we'll have peace. Lu Shi sneered. You don't have to worry about your sister. Her life will not be in danger. As for you, the only person I'm worried about now is you. I'm afraid you won't be able to die in peace. Whether the system won or Jiang. Ji Shengli, Lu Shi couldn't live without the feelings of the system. No matter how much the system despised him, it still needed to absorb him to increase its strength. Jiang? Needless to say, Ji now had a human body, but he could faintly sense that Jiang? The knife at Ji's waist was very scary. It didn't matter to Lu Shi who won or lost. Sigh, when the gods fight, the mortals suffer. Lu Shi felt that he could still save them, at the same time, Jiang? Ji sneezed several times in a row. She rubbed her nose and said, "That B** is talking behind my back." She sneezed one after another and couldn't stop. If this continued, she wouldn't be able to hold in her pee. Wei Ci said faintly, "Now that the master has made such a fuss, how could there be fewer people talking behind your back?" Due to the backward communication in this era, Jiang? Ji would definitely dominate the hot search list. It was guaranteed that the 1st to the 50th would be related to her. He wasn't the first person to know the good news. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.